The wind that circled Dragonstone on the eve of the new century carried unfamiliar teeth. Sea salt and the tang of sulfur were common companions in those black gales. But this night, the air was harsh, brittle, and edged with a chill that belonged to lands far from the narrow sea. It scraped along merlins and arrow slits, it hissed through the mouths of stone dragons, and it traveled down the outer stair to the chamber of the painted table, where Aegon Targaryen stood alone, gloved hands resting on the lacquered forests of the riverlands. Candles guttered. Rhaenys had teased him for brooding, Visenya for wasting kindling. Yet both sisters had retreated hours ago, and still Aegon remained, gaze fixed upon the expanse of emerald and jade that defined the realm he intended to claim. Ships of colored glass adorned the miniature seas. Sunspear glittered ruby under torchlight, and Old Town shone like a pale pearl. Yet Aegon's eyes lingered upon the upper margin of it all, where the wall was rendered in a sweep of cracked moonstone. Even here, a lifetime's ride away, the carved ramparts exuded a cold that pricked his chest. He had never seen the wall, yet tonight it seemed to reach into his thoughts. A horizon of frost-white silence pressing against the margins of every future he imagined. Aegon traced a finger along the wall, as though the raised stone might answer him. Dragons wept blood beneath his skin whenever Dreamfire stirred, and it had stirred often these past moons. First came the vision of a sunless sky, then a dragon's shadow stretched across ice, wings beating slow as centuries. Somewhere beyond the wall, a spear of hoarfrost pierced the sky, and pale figures walked in a storm of quiet snow that swallowed sound itself. Aegon could not name them, but their eyes mirrored the glow of blue forge-steel, bright and terrible. He tried to focus on what lay south, Black Heron's fortress of storm-dark iron, the high towers of Hightower, the gleam of gold under Casterly Rock. But the faint scent of snow returned with each breath, until every candle in the chamber seemed to gutter with winter's breath. The door creaked. Visenya entered without announcement, blade of dark sister slung over one shoulder like a reminder. Though she was older by scarcely a year, 1,000 campaigns nested in her pale stare. She studied him, and the map, and the ghosts swirling behind his purple eyes. "A dragon once seen stalking winter," she said softly, "is a dream-born omen. You used to claim omens were for septons." "Our dragons are forged in fire," he answered, still tracing ice upon the table. "But the fireless cold that walks beyond the wall." He stopped, tasting the unfamiliar uncertainty of the thought. Visenya crossed the room, her armored boots clinking upon the stone. She set Dark Sister against the table. "Rhaenys hears your mutterings in her sleep. You frighten her." He smiled without mirth. "I frighten myself. I cannot tell whether these visions warn of nights to come or whisper of a war already lost." "Then ask them no more questions. You have a kingdom to take." Aegon's gaze climbed from the map to Visenya's scar-kissed cheek. He saw no fear, only the flinty anticipation of battle. Yet even she shivered when the breeze exhaled from the open slit behind him. "Feel it," he said. Visenya lifted a hand, palm outward. "Only wind. Wind from the north. To conquer Westeros is task enough. The Stark lords will kneel, or burn, like the others." Aegon opened his mouth, but the torch nearest the window flared, then died. A hush slunk into the chamber. For a heartbeat it felt as if the world beyond the keep vanished, and they stood atop a barren pillar encircled by void. Then came the sound, faint, distant, yet unmistakable, the cry of a horn, low and mournful, drifting on the unseen currents from leagues away. Visenya reached for Dark Sister. "Ships." "Not ships." Aegon moved to the arrow slit, staring into the black above Blackwater Bay. "No fleet signals upon Horn Hill." This horn came from farther than any sail can travel in a night. Visenya's knuckles whitened. She muttered a Valyrian curse. "Send ravens." "Already done," he whispered. "When?" Dawn's gray light washed Dragonstone in pewter tones, yet the unnatural cold remained. Servants found hoarfrost sheathing window frames. Aegon's stable hands woke to see faint rime clinging to Balerion's iron-skilled flanks. The dragon's breath puffed visibly, steaming in the stable courtyard. Balerion was unbothered. The old black behemoth slept under mountains of ash and winter snow alike. But a stir of unease rippled through riders and grooms. No midsummer night in living memory had carried such chill. When the dragons rose roaring into the pale sky, Merax's glinting gold, Vhagar mournful and ancient, the people of Dragonstone craned upward. They expected, soon, to follow their lord across the sea, to see storms of fire swallow the crowns of six, and turn their lords into ash. Instead, the dragons banked north, and the rumor leapt like wildfire. The Conqueror had changed course. Rhaenys found him upon Balerion's back, gauntleted, brow knit in rigid resolve. She circled on Merax's, sun dazzling off her golden armor. "Brother," she called across the tearing wind, "your crown is west. Are we to fly beyond Eastwatch instead of Old Town?" Aegon's reply rode the currents. "We hunt the cold, that hunts all men." Her laughter was music and grief entwined. "Cold winds no spires, nor ports, nor coin. The South waits. The South can wait a fortnight more. But winter waits for no crown." He gestured across the rolling expanse where sky met sea. "Come, or return to Dragonstone and keep the fires burning against my return." She scowled, coaxed Merax's closer until their dragon's wingtips might have grazed. "Visenya has already flown ahead, to Moat Cailin. She will lead the vanguard of our host." "Our host?" Rhaenys repeated. "Have we raised banners for a war none yet know?" Aegon's gaze was distant. "I have dispatched riders to every lord who bends knee to promise rewards. We march north with what forces can be mustered in 10 days. The wall is near a moon's ride, but dragons fly swifter." "No moon." Rhaenys surveyed him as though seeing a stranger. "There is no enemy amassing in the gift. The free folk raid each season, nothing more. The free folk do not blow horns that freeze the blood." Lightning skipped behind her eyes. Yet though she longed to argue, the tenor of his voice, the soft tremor she alone perceived, told her debate was futile. She inhaled, and in that breath she heard faint echoes of the horn too, as if memory gifted sound anew. "Very well," she said. "I will fly with you." They turned their mounts, wing beats thunderous. Balerion's shadow swallowed the waves below as Merax's gleamed bronze in his wake. South of them Dragonstone's basalt towers dwindled until they were but fanged silhouettes littered upon the horizon. Northward they sped, and every mile the air grew sharper. By noon the dragon's exhalations plumed white like writhing banners. Mehan, Eastwatch by Thessi, stood atop a promontory of frozen stone, its wooden walkways groaning beneath ceaseless gales. Lord Commander Hoarfrost Umber, no kin to the Great John yet more rotund than the nickname suggested, tugged at his cloak, peering into swirling gray. When the first speck appeared far south, he assumed a gull. With the second speck he frowned. He had seen ravens large as hairs on the wall, but these black dots grew larger still, until each consumed a slice of sky. A third shape came, golden and bright. Horns bellowed as shadows eclipsed the watchtowers. Men spilled onto the courtyard shouting oaths unheard since the age of heroes. Balerion descended like a falling eclipse, talons carving stone, wings folding with a crash that shook hoarfrost from battlements. Meraxes swept across the gatehouse, landed with such force 2 ancient merlins cracked. Vhagar dropped moments later, scarred and baleful, purple smoke curling from her jaws. Night scrambled back as each dragon cast massive wings to settle. The Night's Watchers had gazed upon giants once, some said, but never had a beast like Balerion stood before them, blacker than coal, veins glowing faint red where furnace heart thrummed. Among the trembling swirl of cloaks emerged the Lord Commander. His sausage fingers twisted a bit of charcoal hair that clung to his brow. "Your Grace," he managed in a voice high as frostbite. Aegon dismounted, boots crunching rime. "Show me your ravens." Umber blinked. "Ravens? We have them aplenty. Food stores short, but feathers enough." "Last night," Aegon said, a horn sounded across the world. It rose from the north like a wraith's howl. "Tell me you heard it." We did not, Your Grace." No horn reached our ears. Storm, perhaps. Visenya slipped from Vagar. No storm. She scanned the men. You guard the wall, yet heard nothing. Did you sleep so soundly you missed the cold creeping up your ramparts? Something in her tone hollowed the commander's chest. But before retort arrived, the outer gate creaked open. A ranger in soot-muddied mail stumbled through, his left arm wrapped in ragged leather. Icy blood encrusted the sleeve. A silent alarm rippled through the yard as brothers rushed. The ranger sagged to knees before Aegon, snow swirling around him like ash. "Speak," Aegon commanded. The ranger lifted gloved fingers. We saw them." "Who?" The man met Aegon's gaze, eyes glassy and bright. "Pale things. Their captain. Taller than any man. His blade. Blue flame without fire." Visenya knelt, ripping away the ranger's sleeve. A wound scored the flesh, edges rimed with crystals that hissed and vanished at her touch. Frost spread slow spiderwebs toward the heart. "Cold steel?" she asked. "No," he rasped. "Colder than steel." Rhaenys joined them. "You outpaced pursuit?" The ranger coughed. When the horn sounded a second time, the dead rose. He swallowed spiders of breath. "We killed them." They rose again. His voice broke. Sir Edric remained to hold a pass, but they... I saw his eyes turn blue. The courtyard fell deathly still. Umber licked dry lips. "Ice tales to frighten new brothers. Yet his wound is no tale," Aegon finished. He stood. "Prepare your meager garrison. Double the men on every tower." Umber's chin trembled. "We have fewer than 800 here. The Shadow Tower and Castle Black might lend. Send for every crow you can muster." Aegon's words were iron. "And dispatch ravens south. Tell the Stark Lord I summon him to war beyond his wildest imagining." "Mimicrine." Umber swallowed. "The Starks have guarded this wall for thousands of years, Your Grace. They are sworn to defend against these creatures. But winter lingers yet in the far north. The free folk are restless." He gestured to the dragons looming in the yard. "With such beasts, perhaps we..." "Do not mistake spectacle for victory," Aegon said quietly. "Balerian's fire can melt steel and stone. But the Night King, he tasted the title like poison, wields ice older than memory. We will need more than flame." Visenya touched Dark Sister's hilt. "We will need Valyrian steel." Aegon met her gaze. "Then let us gather every sword the realm possesses. But first, where is the Horn's master?" The ranger shuddered. "Far north, in a fortress of ice. I saw spires shining in starlight, with shapes moving across them like shadows come to life." Rhaenys looked to Aegon. He nodded. "Show us." The godswood of Winterfell rustled beneath a sky thick with bruised clouds. Lord Torrhen Stark strode along the snowy path, hair untouched by gray, though his eyes bore lines carved by years of wardenship. Ravenship messages nested in his mind, tales of dragons glimpsed above Moat Cailin, horns of doom blowing upon the wind, and a request he kneel before a king he had never met. The North sang old songs of resistance, yet something in Torrhen's bones whispered that this summons was unlike any other. He paused before the heart tree, its red leaves trembling. The faces carved into the trunk seemed to weep. The gods of the first men offered no words. His bastard half-brother, Brandon Snow, approached. "Ravens from Eastwatch," he said, handing a scroll. "The wall's commanders speak of dead men walking." Torrhen broke the seal. His breath steamed as he read. "The Conqueror travels to them." Brandon tilted his head. With dragons and steel." A long silence followed. "He commands us south, to fight a foe older than our house." Brandon frowned. "War against southern lords, we understand. But this, if true, the legends have waked." His hand strayed to the bronze hilt at his belt. "Ice spares no banner." Torrhen inhaled the godswood's resinous dusk. "Then we ride south to the wall. But Aegon commands you to Eastwatch, and I will answer. Yet I will answer as a king of the North, not some craven scuttling to bend knee." Brandon's expression brightened with fierce pride. "We march at first light," Torrhen said. "Send word to every holdfast. The north rides with winter's bite at its heels." He turned to the heart tree once more, and for an instant he thought the weeping eyes blinked, snow-white bark seeming to mourn. He whispered beneath breath, "If the long night returns, let every soul remember who we were when the darkness came." Roya. Beyond the wall, the Night King watched storms gather. He stood upon a promontory of cracked glacier, eyes shining like moons through drifting snow. Around him the dead waited, quiet as libraries of ice. They bore no breath, no warmth, yet the blue fires within their sockets flickered as if responding to an unseen wind. When he lifted his spear, its blade wrought from translucent crystal, those fires sharpened into points of hunger. He motioned, and the dead shifted aside. From within their ranks lumbered a giant, flesh pale, beard stiff with frost. Its chest cavity gaped, ribs exposed and rimed. It knelt before the Night King, head bowed. The king pressed an open palm to its brow. Frost spread like veins as ancient runes hissed into existence along the giant skull. There was no sound beyond the whisper of snow across ice. Then the Night King looked south. Somewhere beyond white horizons, dragons wheeled. He felt their heat as distant stabs, irritating as embers upon a glacier. The memory of dragons was older than his death, older than his life. Fire had once been wielded against him, but fire had not ended him. His eyes narrowing, he extended a clawed finger. The horn's call lifted again, a bass note of despair that rolled across the tundra, climbed the stunted pines of the haunted forest, crossed the wall, and echoed into the hearts of waking men. Its second blast shook old citadels, its third would break them. Yet even as the sound faded, the Night King did not lower his hand. Frost gathered along his arm, coalescing into shapes of rime-hurled armor. He remembered another age, a battlefield scented of ash, where wyverns and wingless drakes blackened the skies. He had walked that field after the firestorm, delegation of darkness among cinders, and he had learned the truth. Dragons might devour armies, but their scales melted all the same if the cold was deep enough. He turned to the giant. With a rasp, the creature stood, towering. A wordless command passed. The giant lumbered to a cliff, seized a frozen boulder weighing as much as a cottage, hoisted it with bone and creak strains, and hurled it into the ice valley below. Lorik echoes boomed as it shattered. Fissures raced outward like onyx lightning, and from those cracks climbed shapes of bone and ice. Spiders with chitinous limbs of crystal. Mammoths armored in plates of frozen sinew. Thin shadows flitted between them, swords like icicles knocked at their sides. The Night King watched without expression until the last beast rose. Then he lowered his hand. Snow resumed its gentle descent, nearly hiding the shattered boulder at the base of the cliff. Somewhere in the gray whiteness a raven croaked in fear, then fell silent as its wings stilled mid-beat, feathers frosting in mid-air. It landed far below and did not move again. A silent legion collected at the Night King's heel. They waited, swords raised to a sky that offered neither dawn nor dusk. Only the eternal hinge between. He inhaled once, a soundless breath that drew no vapor, and the storm around him expanded, spiraling, until distant peaks disappeared. He had learned patience from centuries locked beyond walls of men. But when dragons came north, then patience would shatter. 10 days after the horn's second call, Aegon stood upon the icy ramparts of Eastwatch, facing a host he could not deny. The north had answered. Stark banners of gray direwolf snapped in polar gale. Hundreds of Karstarks, Umbers, Manderleys, Magnors, and hill clans marched in furs and battered mail. Even skirling raiders of the Skagos Isles sent sinewy men with obsidian jaxes. In the courtyard pavilions rose in drifts of color. Crimson dragons, silver krakens, black bats of Harrenhal, green cranes of Crane. Perhaps only a tenth of Westeros' full strength. Yet here at the world's edge, the army seemed vast enough to move a mountain. Still, the wall loomed taller than any keep Aegon had taken. It dwarfed even the composure of Balerion, who prowled its shadow, snorting bursts of fire that melted holes in the snow-packed yard. Aegon addressed his gathered captains beneath the creaking hoist tower. Lord Torrhen Stark, sworn sword and warden of the north. Visenya with dark sister strapped across her spine. Rhaenys hair braided in dragon steel bands. Sir Corlys Velaryon, Lord of the Tides, and Maester Edwys of the Citadel, keeper of old Valyrian texts. The wall separates realms, Aegon began, voice carrying upon the crisp air. But walls are illusions when winds bear death across them. Dragons crossed the world and shaped mine and my sister's destiny. Now something colder than death crosses yours. Bet. Torrhen's face was carved stone. We will stand, as we have stood before. Aegon nodded. I do not ask you to bend knee. I ask that you ride with me beyond the wall. A mutter rippled through lesser lords. Torrhen's lips parted. We hold line here. The night's watch is broken, Visenya interrupted. Within 2 nights, the haunted forest will vomit corpses upon the gates. If the wall falls, your castles and halls will follow. If we strike beyond the wall now, we meet the threat before it swells. Lord Manderley stepped forward, cheeks ruddy. Your dragons may grant victory, yet how will footmen traverse those frozen wastes? Our horses wither in such cold. Rhaenys answered. We advance in 3 prongs. The fastest host rides under Lord Stark along the King's Road to the Shadow Tower, then across the Bridge of Skulls. The dragons carry supply casks and fly ahead to harry the enemy's vanguard. Aegon and my sister lead the second corps. Valyrian steel wielders and picked archers. From Eastwatch along the coast, seeking the frozen bays where whites cannot retreat. Now, Antimnerer. And the third? Someone asked. Visenya's smile was thin. Aegon will tell you. Aegon's eyes swept them. I will ride Balerion across the wall this night, with a small guard. Maester Edwys uncovered a record of ancient dragon steel hidden under the shadow of the snow forest. Obsidian spears blessed by children of the forest. If it exists, those relics may pierce even the Night King's heart. We must secure them. Memortizy. A hush settled, broken only by shrieking gulls. Torrhen Stark inclined his head. I lend you my best ranger and my bastard brother. Brandon knows those woods. Aegon bowed acknowledgement. Then dawn will find us beyond the curtain of ice. Prepare your men. And kneel. Night lowered above Eastwatch like a titan's palm. Torches burned along the ramparts, wavering under monstrous winds. Atop the wall, in a watchpost open to the spinning cosmos, Aegon paced beside Balerion's black coils. Snow whirled around dragon and rider. Pale half-moonlight glazed the beast's iron scales as if forging him anew from frozen ore. Aegon wore armor of darkened Valyrian steel, no ornament save the 3-headed dragon at his breast. At his hip rode the ancient sword Blackfire, blades swirling with ghost silver patterns no smith could replicate. He thought of Valyria's doom, of mountains splitting to reveal molten veins. He wondered if ice could birth a doom as fiery. Brandon Snow approached, fur cloak flapping, eyes bright, cheeks scar-kissed by wind. Rangers at the gate, my king. Not your king, Aegon corrected softly. Call me Aegon. Brandon smiled. On the other side of that wall, titles matter less than warmth. Truth. Aegon rested a hand on Blackfire's grip, feeling the metal's faint thrum. You know the path? We cross the shivering seas, arm frozen solid, skirt the pines until we reach the lost caverns. If the tales speak true, children's caves still home weeping trees and obsidian. Surprise flickered in Aegon's chest. You believe children still live in those woods. I believe some forests guard secrets older than men. Aegon glanced at the swirling dark. Then let us wake them. He climbed Balerion's saddle, Brandon mounting a rangy gelding positioned near the ice ramp. At the gate below, 30 seasoned rangers tightened swaddled reins. Fire-hardened spears tipped with dragon glass glittered. Some wore simple iron, others bore cobbled suits of lobster plate, but all displayed the same silent dread as the portcullis groaned open. Outside lay a land of glass. Moonlight sheathed ice plains in shimmer. Pines groaned under hoarfrost, so heavy branches bent groundward. Silence draped everything like wool. Balerion lumbered forward, wings unfurled in titanic stretch before launching skyward. His roar fractured stillness. Below him, men rode into the unknown. Aegon felt the pulse of flame in Balerion's throat ready, but he restrained the beast. Fire would cast them as a beacon in a black land. This night required stealth. He pressed low, guiding Balerion above drifting clouds to hide their silhouette. Beneath, the icy continent unfolded, a blanket of white overshadowing all memory of green. Some miles ahead, a thin valley cut through forests of petrified spruce. A river once flowed there, now a frozen ribbon glimmering with stars' reflections. Aegon steered toward it, searching for the canyon's mouth. Through ragged clouds he spied figures trudging across the ice in stuttering lines. Tattered leathers, blades of broken scavenged steel. Wildlings, thought he. A desperate caravan. But something trailed them. Pale shapes loping on silent feet. Eyes gleaming cold sapphire. Aegon cursed softly. These living souls would not reach the wall alive. He weighed the promise of hiding against the vow of kings. He turned Balerion in a smooth arc. The dragon rasped, eager. A blaze of ruddy gold erupted from Balerion's maw, roaring across the sky to crash upon the ice plain. Flames gusted like a desert storm. The undead pack blackened, limbs charred. Torsos bursting as ice cracked from within. Wildlings screamed, some in terror of fiery death, others in awe. Yet within the inferno stood a solitary figure unharmed. Tall, thin, carved of swirling effulgence like midnight glacier. Its cloak flapped, though no wind blew. The Night King gazed upward. Fire flickered along him, then died. Ice crystals coalesced upon his outline, extinguishing Balerion's flame even as it still spilled from the dragon's jaws. The figure lifted his spear. The tip brightened with internal cold, so fierce frost webs laced the air. Aegon's heart hammered. He had hoped to encounter whites, not their sovereign. But instinct overcame fear. He shouted to Balerion. The dragon circled, billowing steam. The Night King tracked them, spear poised. A sudden shrill whistle cut through the crackling air. An icicle thicker than a man's thigh launched skyward from the valley floor. Spinning end over deadly end, Aegon hauled on reins. Balerion banked violently. But the shard grazed the dragon's right wing. A spiderweb fracture blossomed across the membrane, his roar slicing the night. Aegon felt the jolt. Balerion dipped but steadied. Below, the Night King had not moved. Instead, he turned away, stepping across burning heaps of dead, as though strolling a garden path. Walking south. Aegon considered pursuit, but saw shadows converging. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of whites rousing from snowdrifts like insects. More spears of ice angled at the ready. The terrain offered little altitude for Balerion's wounded wing. He gritted teeth. Reluctance is not retreat, he told himself. He wheeled the dragon, rising above cloud cover out of range, and sped west toward the rendezvous canyon. Flames guttered along the path behind, fading. On a ridge, the Night King stopped. He looked skyward once more. No emotion crossed his face, yet a shimmer of amusement glinted in his cold eyes. He lifted a hand, and distant thunder answered, though no clouds marred the stars. Hooray! Brendan's company reached the canyon well before dawn. Torches dim under Aurora's tremulous glow. When Balerion descended beside them, men flinched. The dragon's wing bled trails of smoke and molten ice. Aegon dismounted, breath coming in fogs. He recounted the encounter in hushed tones. Brendan's expression grew grim as hoarfrost. "We ride deeper," he said. "There are caves ahead where no cold fire reaches." They tethered horses at the canyon mouth. Ropes lowered men into a narrow fissure, where stone wept beads of clear liquid that froze upon cheeks. Inside, tunnels spiraled downward. Strange roots like veins of pale light clung to ceilings, casting a faint phosphorescence. They passed petrified trunks of weirwoods so old their carved faces had eroded into ghostly hollows. At last, they entered a cavern vast enough to drown castles. Stalagmites rose like ivory towers from a crystal floor. In the center, A pool mirrored the rudolite gloom. On its far side, 6 stone plinths encircled a dais. Upon each rested bundles bound in spiderweb linen. Brandon drew a dragon-glass blade, severed wrappings. Inside lay spearheads of obsidian, edges rippling with runic etchings. Beside them, arrowheads, axes, and a long sword forged of dark glass with a fuller of smoky quartz. Gasps echoed. Brandon lifted the sword. It was impossibly light, seemed to hum in his palm, and shadows retreated from its edge. "Eshbane," he whispered. Aegon approached. He selected a spearhead, feeling the bitter cold leach into his gloves. "We take all." They loaded relics into leather satchels lined with fur and wax cloth. The work was silent, save for soft clinks of obsidian. Yet as the last blade was packed, the faint glow dimmed. Roots above flickered and died, casting them into near blackness. Aegon felt the cavern's air shift. He turned, and through the tunnel they had entered, a pale mist flowed like blood spilling upward. Within it, a chorus of soft clacking sounds approached, bone upon bone. He whispered a command. Torches flared. The mist retreated a handspan, revealing jagged silhouettes, moving in unnatural jerks. Eyes lit azure, one by one, until dozens glittered in the dark. "Hold!" Aegon called. Rangers formed a crescent, spears leveled. Brandon raised Eshbane, its edge catching torchlight and scattering it into shards. The shapes halted. Then a new sound filled the chamber. The horn. Not distant. Not muffled. It resonated inside their ribs, a vibration older than stone. Cavern walls shook. Dust fell like ash. The dead stepped forward as one. Aegon's heart slammed. He slid Blackfire free. The first wight leapt. Its nails, rhymed dagger-sharp, slashed. Yet Blackfire severed its neck clean. Head hit ice, rolled. The body crashed a moment later. But where blood should have spilled, shards of black ice scattered. Brandon thrust Eshbane. The blade punched through a wight's chest with a glassy crunch. Frost spiders crawled across the wound, then dissolved. The corpse shuddered. Ice snuffed. Yet for each foe downed, 3 replaced it. Rangers fought shoulder to shoulder, but the press of the dead drove them back. Distantly, stones groaned overhead. Aegon realized the cavern might collapse. He shouted above the din, "Retreat!" Back to the fissure. Men withdrew in disciplined pairs. Brandon remained by Aegon's side as rear guard, blades lashing. They fought step by step, drawing the dead into the narrowing throat of the tunnel. Here, 2 men could stand abreast. Here, numbers meant nothing. Brandon's obsidian sword hummed. Aegon's Valyrian steel gleamed violet. They carved a wall of sparks and shattered ice, until a heap of twitching parts clogged the passage. At last they reached the rope ladder. Rangers scrambled up. Brandon glanced behind. Silence reigned. No shapes advanced. Aegon climbed last. He feared the Night King would appear, spear of frost singing, but nothing stirred. The rope ladder rasped. They emerged into pre-dawn gloom where frost flowers crusted the canyon wall. Horses whinnied, stamping in fear. Above them, Aurora draped the firmament. Aegon mounted. Valerian roared, wing injury forgotten in the dragon's fury. The king looked to Brandon. "We live." "For now," the bastard replied. He hefted the satchel of relics. "Pray the wall still stands." Aegon nodded once. "Ride." They thundered along the frozen river. Behind, a fissure in the canyon wall brightened with eerie blue glow. Shapes spilled, but dragonfire poured from the sky, sealing the pursuit under sheets of molten glass. Balerian's breath left trenches glowing like sunrise. The living fled south, but Aegon knew the Night King was not trapped, not defeated, only deterred, and tomorrow or the next day winter would press again. Yet they carried weapons wrought in times when night first claimed the earth. He held that hope close as the horizon tinged pink. 5 hours might not see this war ended, nor 5 weeks, but the first strokes had been etched upon the blank canvas of ice and fire. As Balerian's wings strove against the frigid dawn, Aegon felt both dread and exhilaration. For dragons and death had now met in truth, and neither would yield the world without devouring the other whole. Aegon. The eastern sky was little more than a tarnished mirror when the return riders spilled from the forest's ragged edge and burst onto the frozen shore beneath East Watch's towering slice of ice. Balerian's shadow swam above them like a drifting continent, steam veiling the black dragon's muzzle with every breath. Only then, when the gates clattered wide and the first ranger staggered across the threshold, did the battlements erupt into a clamor that cut through the night's last hush. Men shouted for maesters, for braziers, for every drop of good strong wine. The ichor-flecked obsidian hall glimmered greasy green in torchlight, vivid proof that legend could be carried in a sack like common iron nails. Aegon dismounted without ceremony. Brandon Snow slid from his gelding beside him, but the bastard's knees folded at once. Weeks of thin rations and the feverish dread of that blue-lit cavern clung to him like a second skin. Aegon caught his elbow, steadying him. "Maester on the double," he said to a nearby sergeant, but Brandon shook his head. "Let them see it first," he whispered, tightening one rock-knuckled fist around the satchel strap. "They must know the old tales breathe before they bleed me white with leeches." Aegon nodded, and side by side they crossed the yard, past steaming forges where blacksmiths dozed beside half-hammered spearheads, past piles of felled pine, dragged from the haunted forest for palisade repair, past the ringed wall where the last night's frost still glittered on arrow loops. Soldiers drew back as they passed, some making the threefold sign of the seven, others brushing fingers across wolf head brooches. The stench of fear thickened the air more palpably than smoke. Had the wall once seemed invincible? In the lull before dawn, even the granite giants of its towers looked vulnerable, as if frost itself gnawed the mortar grain by grain. Visenya met them before the armory, half-garmored, blade of dark sister Freshhond, and slung across her back. Her eyes flicked from Brandon's hollow cheeks to the bulging leather sack and back. She said nothing at first. Instead, she thrust a wineskin into Brandon's trembling hand. He gulped once, twice, ruby liquid spilling down his beard. Color crawled up through his skin like sunrise under snow. "I trust the price was high," Visenya said at last, voice quiet. Brandon managed a grin that showed more teeth than comfort. "Dead men outnumbered us 3-1, but they bled light when the black glass kissed them." Aegon loosened the satchel laces. Visenya leaned forward. Torchlight skimmed glossy spearheads, arrowheads, 2 hand axes. The obsidian longsword still wrapped in silken spiderweb linen. "Gods," he breathed. And for the first time in many moons her tone carried awe. Before she could question further, footsteps hammered across the yard. Lord Commander Hoarfrost Umber lumbered close, belly straining chain links, breath smoking. Behind him marched Torrens Stark in wolf-gray mail and Rainey's, silver hair unbound and streaming like a comet's tail. Stark's gaze dropped to the sack, widened, then turned seaward to the far horizon, as though he half expected dawn to peel back and reveal an army of ice at the waterline. Aegon straightened. "The cavern exists. Its guardians stand ready to walk nightly roads, yet we pierced their gate and returned alive. Now seven." Rainey's drew off a mailed gauntlet, reached into the satchel, and touched a spearhead. She hissed, as if burned. "Cold as any smith's quench. But it sings." She lifted the shard to her ear, and her eyes unfocused. "I hear nothing," she murmured. "Yet my bones ring." Torren accepted the spearhead next. His hard northern features softened a hair's breadth. The Stark Lord cradled the obsidian as if it were a swaddled babe. "The first men fought with such weapons. My great-great-grandsire's sword bearing black edge in the dark of the long night. So the Scalds claim." He met Aegon's stare squarely. "I thought those Scalds drunk on pine pitch." "A lesson," Brandon rasped. "Never wager against dead poets." Maester Edwys bustled from the archway then, hair stuffed under a sagging cowl, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Word reached the rookery. Our king has returned weighted with ancient curiosities." His tone tried for cheer, but snagged on dread. He tipped a torch toward the hall, mouth shaping silent calculations. If the obsidian stock buried yonder equals what the chronicles of Yandel suggest. It does, Brandon cut in, far sharper than courtesy allowed. And more. Whole cartloads left behind under watch of things best left frozen. Edwys swallowed. Then we must learn their secrets at once. Dragonfire can melt obsidian to glassy ruin, alas. But coal forges? Slow and coaxing? He trailed off, lost in metallurgical daydream. Visenya snapped him back. You have 4 days at most. My scouts report a horde moving south at impossible pace. They marched by moonlight, if walking can name that glide across drifts. Our outriders counted 10,000 shapes before dawn's pall, forced retreat. Then ran unto me. Hoarfrost dabbed sweat from his brow, though the air would freeze spit. We have scarcely 800 Black Brothers garrisoned, and perhaps 3,000 northern levies inside these walls. The rest still string south along the King's Road. They will not arrive before the dead. Torin exhaled. Then, the wall must hold, as it did in ancient days. Edwys drew himself up. The wall once held dragon steel anchors at each of its gates, bars of obsidian hammered into steel beams. They neutralized the sorcery the others wield. Most were pried out centuries ago, when repair crews found the stuff brittle and useless against living foes. But a few sockets remain unfilled. Restore them, and doorways might resist the magic that compels corpses upward. Aegon nodded. Do it. But we require smiths versed in both iron and glass, Edwys protested. House manually quarter their smiths along the quay, Rhaenys replied. Summon them. They forge chainmail at sea spray depth. They can temper black glass. Ah. Visenya's boot scraped the cobbles. Obsess over gates if you like. My concern is that the Night King barely flinched beneath Balerian's breath. He hurled ice that cracked dragon wing. No gate stays him if he chooses otherwise. A hush swallowed the courtyard. Balerian's injured wing loomed behind them, membrane patched with hastily stitched sailcloth that smoked where it touched scales. Even the black dragon's low rumble carried a rare tremor. There were, it seemed, adversaries Balerian did not rush to meet. Rhaenys approached the beast, resting a palm against his forelimb. Wounded pride weighs heavier than torn flesh, she told Aegon gently. Balerian will fly again by noon, and stronger for the scar. Aegon believed her because he must. He stared up at the pale glimmer where cloud met wall, and caught a faint shimmer, no more than a trick of dawn. A drifting snowflake, perhaps, yet instinct whispered otherwise. Winter's scouts already tested high currents above their heads. He turned back to the others. The horde reaches us within 4 days. Our reinforcements arrive in 6, 7, at worst. We must delay the Night King or meet him in the open where dragons can burn, without fear of melting our own fortress. No. Brandon spat into the snow. Open ground favors them. Ice giants wield boulders. Dead men feel no heat, and if they disperse under fire, they simply reform behind your line, Visenya responded. Yet castle courtyards leave no room for Balerian's wings, nor Merax's or Vagaga for that matter. And Valyrian steel is rare as honor in Lys. Maester Edwys interjected, wringing his sleeves. Forges will craft arrowheads all day. Every archer along the ramparts can carry 5 obsidian shafts. Fire arrows tipped in dragon glass might undo vigor in their ranks. Umber snorted. 800 rangers can loft perhaps 4,000 arrows before quivers run dry. 10,000 whites soak that like summer rain. We need allies who also thirst for the Night King's demise. Torhin's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. The free folk. Wildlings? Rhaenys arched a sleek brow. They hate the others more fiercely than any kneeler, Torhin said. And they number many thousands still caught north of the advancing line. If we carve a corridor through, they'll join for vengeance or die trying. Nistuna. Aegon weighed that. Free folk might turn on Southron levies once winter passed, but winter would not pass if the Night King triumphed. Send ravens, he ordered. Promise safe passage through East Watch's Sally Port. Any man, woman, or child who bears arms or seeds of loyalty may cross. We will feed them after the battle." Visenya bristled. "Extra mouths drain stores. Extra spears steady lines," Brandon answered before Aegon could. "I vouch for them. Let the dead meet their victims reborn in living fury." Mesichan. A glance of silent accord spanned Brandon and Torhen. The Old North, stirring from its frost-fogged myths. Aegon rapped knuckles on Blackfire's pommel. "So be it. In 4 days, we hold a long valley, 2 leagues north of the wall. The coast cliffs hem the east, dense pine the west, no flanking. Dragon peaks can strafe overhead. Lord Stark, gather every fast rider, and prepare to escort free folk down the shoreline as we test the ground. Visenya leads a wing of rangers with obsidian arrows to harry the Horde's vanguard. Rhaenys, you and I oversee Balerion's recuperation and coordinate forge output." "And Miraxes?" she asked softly. "Miraxes will hunt giants," Aegon said, managing a thin smile. Plans were drawn then, ink freezing to quills between strokes. Braziers lined the great hall. Iron stoves gorged on rare Riverlands coal. Scribes trembled while drafting orders that would decide if Dawn still belonged to men. The noise of forging rose an octave, a metallic heartbeat echoing through every stone in Eastwatch's keep. Hammers fell, sparks leapt, and obsidian slivers peeled away like midnight petals. The smell was singular. Burnt blood and brittle perfume of volcanic glass, superheated for the first time in thousands of years. Outside, frost deepened. Clouds gathered in serried ranks, low and ragged, skimming just above the wall's summit. The air adopted an eerie hush, as though even the wind stood respectful of the anvil's rhythm. Men whispered that the sun failed to crest its usual arc. Noon light came wan, silver as moonglint, and slipped off the horizon before true afternoon. Rhaenys found Aegon alone in the rookery tower, unhelmed, studying a quill sketch of the coming battlefield scratched over scrimshaw parchment. He toyed with a tiny carved dragon pinned upon the paper like a chessman. As she entered, he did not look up. His voice drifted, thoughtful, full of an ache she rarely heard. "We were raised to conquer green fields and shining crowns," he said. "How strange then that my greatest test occurs in a land where nothing grows." She stepped to his side. "Great tests choose their hour, not their battlefield." He exhaled, long and low. "Visenya sees only the challenge. Torhen sees only the cost. I see the memory of my own visions, a sky without sun or stars, only drifting snow and winged shadows larger than thought." His hand clenched the dragon token. "I must not let that vision stand." Rhaenys placed 2 fingers under his chin, turning his face. "You will not, Aegon." He stared at her. For a heartbeat, his violet eyes betrayed raw fear. Then the mask settled. "The Night King moved unhurried," he murmured. "A stiff time bent for him. Perhaps it does. But we shall bend sky and ground in return." Night deepened. Snow began to fall in earnest, thick, slow flakes that refused to dance. They simply drifted, inexorable, like ash from a smothered hearth. Under their silent descent, preparations churned. The smiths finished the first run of dragonglass arrowheads by moonrise, 500 glinting darts stacked on linen trays. Archers filed through, tying 5 to each hip quiver, hands shaking with fragile hope as they touched edges sharp enough to shave a hair's shadow. More complicated were the obsidian spear sockets for gate bars, stubby spikes sheathed in iron collars. 2 doors were thus reinforced by dawn. Visenya rode at first light, leading 100 knights, watch rangers, and 50 northern bowmen up a goat path seldom trodden even by craven smugglers. They carried clusters of obsidian arrows wrapped in furs to prevent jostle. Cresting a ridge, they found only emptiness. Expanses of white, broken by sagging pines. But prints roamed there. Unnatural. Perfectly spaced as if ice itself had marched. Visenya ordered torches doused and advanced beneath the sifting crystalline hush. Around midday they spied a column of whites dragging sleighs stacked with pale corpses, likely free folk slain during the Horde's push. One ranger retched into his beard. "Visenya, expression carved from basalt, raised 2 fingers. 20 bowstrings whispered. The lead sleigh's driver, once a grinning wildling boy of 15, snapped around, sapphire eyes wide. Obsidian shafts shattered his brow. The rest of the column swiveled in eerie unison, but more arrows performed their cold magic. Bodies collapsed like felled trees, limbs twitching in futile afterthought. Black glass ended them where iron had no claim. Visenya sent a runner south. Proof. The dragon glass worked. Spirits soared for the first time since the shadow of thawless winter had loomed. Yet she kept her men hidden. The horde's main body still crept unseen, and it was not her place to invite its full weight. Instead, she set ambush after ambush, whittling supply lines, felling undead scouts, burning cairns of slain free folk before they could be raised again. At night, her archers slept in holes carved into snowbanks, barely warmer than death itself. The sky glowed green sometimes with aurora, and within that luminous veil White's eyes gleamed back like submerged sapphires. She never let her hand stray far from Dark Sister's grip. Far south of her line, Torhen Stark rode along the shoreline with 500 horse. Black Brothers and Northern Cavalry intermingled. Aegon had lent them Meraxes as vanguard aerial guard. The bronze she-dragons circled high, scales flashing when the unseen sun caught on their bright humors. The king's road to Castle Black had become a ribbon of misery. Hunters' huts twice overrun by undead. Free folk camps smashed beneath giant tracks wider than a wagon bed, and always the smell of cold rot, like pantry onions gone to mildew-eye. Yet the sound of Merax's wings drew living survivors from every nook. Ragged mothers, maimed hunters, summer children now gnawed by frost. They answered Torren's call, stumbling south in ragged columns. Some so weak they needed snowshoes fashioned from pine boughs. But every mile more gathered, and their eyes sharpened with resolve whenever the she-dragon's shadow swooped overhead. On the second evening, as they skirted a frozen inlet 2 leagues north of Long Barrow, Torhen's scouts captured 3 living giants. Not wights, true giants towering 30 feet, pelts crusted with snow. They raised no weapons when surrounded. Instead, they boomed laments in the old tongue, voice like boulders grinding. Brandon Snow hurried forward, fluent in those archaic growls. He gleaned that the giants' last mountain refuge had fallen to the Night King's sweep. Their kin were chained in ice or reanimated, forced to batter down gnarled trees protecting children's caves. Tears froze upon the giants' cheeks where mammoth hide could not shield sorrow. Torren knelt before them, no easy feat in knee-deep powder, looked up and spoke in slow, deliberate syllables. "The wall stands yet. Come behind it. Save what giant kind remains." He offered no promise more. But giants prized plain truth. They bowed their shaggy heads and followed, enormous footfalls crunching in patient rhythm behind the ragtag host. News of giants quickened hearts at Eastwatch. Children whispered bright-eyed that giants and dragons would soon feast on the ice demons. Some adults even dared laughter. Hope is a skittish animal. Feed it a morsel, and it will return. Yet while men stoked hope, the Night King fed certainty. On the 3rd night after Visenya's first ambush, her outriders glimpsed movement along a frozen river gorge. An army of whites shifting en masse. They flowed like a single organism, unslowed by drifts that swallowed human wastes. Among them strode pale knights astride eyeless horses, black frost steaming from nostrils. And there, near their center, towered a figure on a dead elk with rack of crystal antlers. The Night King. He did not glance left or right. He wore stillness as armor. Dawn revealed their numbers, nearer 30,000 than 10. Visenya's scouts fled south, arrows spent. The ambushes had salted only the outer rind. A dark core advanced intact. At Eastwatch, Rhaenys had coaxed Balerion back into air. The patched wing thumped laboriously at first, but muscle hardened with each circuit above the battlements. 2 other smaller dragons had been ferried up from Dragonstone. Arax, a lean flame-gold adolescent, and Yorix, a smoky gray male, barely larger than 2 wagons. Their presence lifted Green Boy's spirits, though commanders knew full well that young fire might falter where ancient ice strode. Still, better molten stone than cold despair. The forgeworks operated without cease. Ironmongers hammered rivets to fasten obsidian slivers onto iron spearheads, effectively sheathing soldiers' pikes in black teeth. Old crossbows were restrung thrice to sling heavier quarrels. Some maesters experimented with suspending dragon glass arrowheads inside flasks of wildfire, but most of those prototypes melted on impact, showering the range with green flame and black shards that injured more pigeons than target dummies. Aegon forbade further wildfire trials. There was risk enough wielding dragonflame beside a groaning ice wall. By evening of the fourth day, the valley chosen for first clash lay between two bluffs shaped like broken fangs. Snow blanketed its basin knee-high. Wind hummed along escarpments, carrying faint echoes of distant horns. Brandon rode to where Aegon stood with Lord Umber and other captains inspecting trenches carved for pits. The bastard slid from his pony, eyes haunted. "They come," he said. "At dawn or sooner." "How large a van?" Umber asked. "Enough to drown this valley thrice," Brandon said flatly. "Some near naked, some armored in scavenged bronze, all tireless. And giants of ice, real giants stolen corpse-wise. At least 4. A shiver rippled the assembled officers. Umber gripped his mace. "Our living giants kick snow like tantrum babes. They'll not stand such kin turn to ice toys." "Oh, they need not stand them alone," Aegon answered. "Fire will test what marrow remains." His gaze lifted skyward where Balerion circled, a shadow blotting thinner clouds. "But remember, the Night King quenched flame once already. Our best chance is to pierce him with dragon glass or Valyrian steel while the dragons disorient his guard. If he falls, whites collapse like puppets." Umber scratched his chin fuzz. "And if he does not fall?" Aegon offered no falsehood. "Then we buy time for the southern host to arrive." Midnight approached. Men huddled behind earthen bulwarks packed with frozen dirt. Snow muffled all but their heartbeats. Archers checked bowstrings again and again, though cold had long since robbed fingertips of feel. On the valley's north rim, Visenya lined her vanguard beneath a stand of stunted spruce. Arax and Yorix perched upon rocky shoulders above, chain leashes slack, riders stroking scales to calm the restlessness that builds in youthful dragons on the cusp of first true battle. Drums sounded faint from Eastwatch's ramparts behind them. They told the old cadence once reserved for swarming wildling tribes: "Stand fast. Stand fast. Loose at will." The sound traveled on a stiff north wind and returned, the echo warped and deeper, as though 10,000 drums answered by snare of bone. The wind itself changed, thickened, heavy with fine ice that stung eyes and hardened nostrils. Men who had prayed for clear sky felt prayers snap like reeds. Darkness gathered not as absence of light, but as presence of cold. Torches paled. Even Balerion's internal fires dimmed, a rasp at the back of his throat. First they heard the creak, wood bending under unnatural frost, leather straps twisting. Then came the horns. Deep moans rolling down from the head of the valley, shaking powder off limbs. One blast, 2 blasts. Then a third that cracked frost into flurries upon every helmet rim. Silence reigned between each note, cold enough to fuse tears to lashes. Shapes emerged. Skeletal outriders astride gaunt steeds with rhyme-stiff manes. They flanked the valley mouth and halted as if marking lines in an invisible ledger. Behind them, whites advanced at a loping jog. Some still wore wildling furs, antler helms, trinkets of bone around necks. Others staggered naked, skin frost-burnt, midnight blue. No breath steamed from their lips, yet snarls reverberated across snow like serrated wind. They carried crude swords, axes, sometimes nothing but clawed fingers. In their midst strode lanky white shadows, ice swords sheathed across backs of spider-glass. Children of the Night King, lieutenants of cold. Visenya raised her armored fist. Bowstrings stretched. Aegon collected a deep breath. Far above them, Balerion opened jaws. But flame did not yet swallow sky. The opening salvo belonged to Obsidian. The command traveled as hiss not roar, loose. 1,000 black arrows snapped free. They soared in perfect silence, vanishing into dark, then reappearing as peppering streaks where Aurora's faint shimmer touched. When they struck, bodies collapsed instantly. Unlike iron that only bit flesh, dragonglass severed the magical ligaments tying spirit to corpse. Whites fell like dropped marionettes, dust geysers rising. The charge faltered. 2 lines of undead crumpled. A second volley hammered them. Archers re-knocked, while breath smoked. Among whites, one ice lieutenant hissed, raising sword overhead. Frost gusted outward in a visible pulse. Arrowheads mid-flight caught that wave, cracked, and shattered into worthless shards. The volley behind it rained harmless. Aegon saw and reacted, signaling dragon riders. From the bluffs Arax launched, letting loose a torrential swirl of yellow-white fire. It struck the lieutenant's frost wave and exploded into a roiling cloud of steam, spraying sizzling slush across ranks. Whites burned, crumpled, some pockets flickered out. But when fire died, Ice Lieutenant remained, cloak steaming but intact, sword still hoisted. Now the valley-mouthed disgorged giants. Their forms were monstrous. Flesh glazed in crystal, joints rasping. One carried a tree trunk stripped bare, its tip sheathed in ice. It swung sideways, flattening 2 pits of sharpened stakes Aegon's engineers had hidden under snow, then trudged onward, slow, inexorable. Behind them rolled pale spiders twice the size of direwolves, legs like spears of quartz. Men on the south ridge whispered prayers too soft for even gods of mercy to hear. Balerion answered fear with a shriek that rattled breastplates. The black dread swooped low, flame boiling inside belly furnace. Aegon rose in the saddle, bracing. He aimed not at the first line, where magical frost might absorb heat, but at the valley floor itself. Balerion spewed a sheet of black mauve fire that cut a molten trench before the giants. Snow flashed to vapor. Ice cracked violently. One giant stumbled into scalding slurry. Steam enveloped it. When haze cleared, its legs were fused into brittle glass, and it toppled, shattering, like a vast porcelain vase. Cheers erupted along the southern ridge. Before victory could bloom, the Night King rode into view, elk gliding above broken whites as though crossing still water. He pointed his spear at Balerion. Hunger twitched, underlying muscles of every corpse, as if one mind gripped them. Arrows forgotten, whites hurled themselves against each other, forming a living mound. They piled high, dead flesh forging ramparts by sheer weight, attempting to breach the trench. Behind them Ice Lieutenant raised arms skyward. A storm answered. Snow whipped sideways, swirling in cyclonic disk. Aurora sputtered out, replaced by a swirling pall the color of burnt bone. Balerion's next flame faltered, caught in crosswinds that stole its heat. Aegon's cloak snapped violently. He leaned forward, urging retreat to regain altitude. Visenya saw danger for what it was. She spurred Vagar from Eastwatch's stables, having kept her massive drake in reserve. The ancient dragon hammered wings once, twice, soared. Her roar, a deeper, aged resonance, vibrated men's teeth. She climbed high, nearly lost in night. Then she angled downward, arrow straight. Visenya whispered in high Valerian. Vagar's jaw parted, but not for fire. Instead, the old dragon exhaled a blast of superheated air, devoid of flame but hot as bellows, aimed squarely at the storm funnel. Heat counters cold, not always by flame, but by vacuum and imbalance. The swirling mass fractured. Wind stuttered. A shudder rippled across white ranks. Invisible threads slackened. Rhaenys, on Miraxes, exploited the gap. She strafed flank lines where no lieutenant's frost shield blinked, dousing them in rolling fire. Whites crackled like tinder and collapsed. Another giant lurched ablaze, thrashing at snarling spiders, crushing 2 inadvertently. The valley floor glowed amber, heat forging steam columns that veiled chaos in flickering curtain. Yet still the Night King glided forward. He dismounted upon the giant's cracked trunk, walking through flames that parted around his presence. He stepped onto the molten trench's rim. Where his feet touched, lava cooled to obsidian, stiff enough to bear weight. He crossed, spear raised. Brandon Snow chose that moment to risk everything. Hidden among 1st Infantry line, he hefted the obsidian longsword Eisbane, then sprinted into the breach. Steam obscured sight, only Quicksilver instincts guided him. Whites lunged. He carved them aside. Sparks of ice flicked from the blade, hissing on contact. He reached the trench edge just as the Night King stepped opposite. 2 heartbeats locked them in stillness. Brandon yelled, a ragged burst of the old tongue. He threw himself over the trench, rolling to feet before the spear darted. Icebane met crystal tip. A chime rang that drowned all lesser noise. Brandon poured momentum into a sweeping cut. The Night King twisted, cloak rippling like dead banners. Spear shaft pivoted, slapped Brandon across ribs. Armor dented, ribs cracked. He staggered but swung upward, grazing the foe's shoulder. Chips of blue ice spiraled away, and for the first time the Night King recoiled half a step. Cold fury howled from him, a soundless shriek that crystallized moisture mid-air. Giants of ice lumbered to protect their sovereign. One lifted Brandon bodily, fingers like cudgels closing around torso. Brandon jammed Icebane pointy first, between its knuckles. Dragon glass sank, pulsed once with inner shadow, and the giant's palm split open. It roared, dropping him into the trench. Brandon plunged through scalding water that had cooled just enough not to flinch flesh from bone. Pain seared, but he scrambled out the far side, crawling under snow smoke. Aegon saw his chance. He wheeled Balerion in to dive. The dragon's roar tunneled air aside. At point-blank range, he unleashed the grueling black-violet furnace inside his throat directly upon the ice. Lieutenant supporting storm magic. The creature dissolved. Fire streamed forward unchecked, lapping across whites, turning ice flesh to rushing water. The Night King thrust spear overhead, calling new frost barrier. But the distance was wrong. His shield formed a beat too late. Flames singed his cloak, curling once pristine edges to glassy tatters before flickering out. When the smoke parted, the glacial monarch stood charred but unbroken. Spear icier than before. But his eyes, those pits of blue rime, flickered briefly. A signal of pain? Recognition. Perhaps fear's first thread. A horn moaned from Eastwatch ramparts. Reinforcements poured through southern entry. Torrhen Stark's vanguard, free folk at their heels, living giants swinging uprooted cedars as clubs. Meraxes banked to clear path. Balerion climbed, conceding Sky Lane. New infantry stormed down ridges into Valley's rear, catching whites between rising hammer and frozen anvil. Battle churned into maelstrom. Time untethered, minutes stretching or shattering. Men fought, fell, rose only to fight anew. Some living dragged corpse legs as though will alone leased them minutes more. Some corpses regained life when obsidian shards were shattered by stray blows. Snow melted then refroze, patching field with treacherous plates. Aegon landed Balerion near the breached trench to search for Brandon. He spied the bastard half submerged in cooling mire, struggling to stand. Aegon leapt down, sprinted across heated ground that singed boot soles. He grasped Brandon under one arm and hauled him out. Brandon's hair smoked. His fur cloak, soaked, steamed violently. "A sword," he rasped. Aegon found Icebane, half buried beside the trench, edge intact. He handed it over. Brandon's grip tightened like a dying prayer. Above, Vagar dueled an undead wyvern, an abomination of leather and frost, reanimated from some ancient carcass. Its wings dripped shards, each beat exhaling daggers of sleet. Visenya clung tight, Dark Sister slicing at veined membranous spans wherever they tangled. Arax attempted to assist, but a spider leg skewered its flank. The young dragon shrieked and spiraled away, bleeding. Yorick's kept to lower altitude, strafing whites near the valley mouth, but a second undead wyvern rose from ravine shadows, intercepting. Rhaenys veered Meraxes to intercept that one, claws locking in midair. Two beasts tumbling earthward in snarling knot, until Meraxes belched fire point blank. Rotting wings ruptured, and both plummeted. At last second, Meraxes released, and regained flight inches above turbid snowfield. Ash swirling behind. Undead wyvern cratered, limbs scattering. Whites shrieked. Some turned to feast on the carcass, forgetting orders. Still, victory refused to declare. The Night King retreated toward Northern Ridge, escorted by 2 unbroken giants and pack of ice lieutenants. As they fell back, wounded whites slumped, then reanimated, forming ragged rearguard. The living pressed pursuit but sagged under exhaustion. Even dragons flagged, breath steaming heavy. Aegon recognized stalemate, wind snatched back by attrition. Yet he also saw cracks. The horde lost momentum, illusions of invincibility, ruptured by dragonglass proof. Tomorrow, with fresh troops from Castle Black and the Shadow Tower joining, they might press advantage. But the Night King did not trade tomorrow. He gambled eons. Brandon swayed, blood freezing along chin. "We cannot let him quit the field," he wheezed. "I know," Aegon said, scanning sky for Balerion. But the black dread hovered far above, wings laboring. A dragon can only breathe so much fire before furnace coals need rest. Aegon's own legs quivered. Yet if the Night King fled to raise more corpses, all they had won tonight would crumble. A sudden thunderclap boomed overhead. Vagar had severed undead wyvern's spine mid-turn. The corpse plummeted in shattered spiral, smashing open valley floor, sending shards of black ice shooting like caltrops. Visenya guided Vagar into hover above Aegon's position. She looked down, eyes blazing. "Climb!" she shouted, wind stealing half the word. "We finish this." Aegon sheathed black fire, hefted Brandon across shoulders. Bastard protested but lacked strength, then leapt, catching Vagar's rigging strap dangling near hind limb. He secured Brandon behind the saddle's lip and vaulted into place before Visenya. She offered no lecture. She simply clicked tongue. Vagar banked hard north. They closed on the Night King's column. Giants slogged slower now, one dragging shattered leg left half melted by Balerion's earlier blaze. A phalanx of lieutenants shielded them with frost walls shaped into angular facets that deflected stray arrows. Vagar roared but withheld breath. They had learned. Raw flame diffused by frost belts wasted heat. Instead, Visenya skimmed just above ground, slaloming between boulders, forcing lieutenants to constantly pivot shields. Frost's spell work demanded concentration. Each kink they introduced taxed sorcery. Brandon clung behind, blinking away blood. He raised Icebane in gloved hand. "Closer," he coughed. Visenya nodded, sloping lower still until snow hissed beneath wings. One lieutenant lost focus, shielding backward, leaving small gap before the Night King. Aegon drew blackfire. Brandon levered up, propped between Aegon's shoulders. Vagar thundered over the gap. Brandon hurled the longsword. Icebane sailed pin straight, spinning once, twice. It struck the Night King's elk mount in breast. Obsidian blade pierced through chest cavity, knocking the beast sideways. Elk exploded into drift of glass shards and bone dust. The Night King tumbled, cloak whirling. Aegon hurled himself from Vagar before Visenya could protest. He landed in snow yards from his enemy. Rolled, came up sword drawn. Night King rose also, ice spear leveled. Frost smoke curled from wounds in his cloak where earlier flame had bitten. The two approached, steps muffled. Battle noise faded behind roaring blood. Aegon swung first. Overhand diagonal, Valyrian steel screaming. Spear intercepted, sparks of frost and violet lightning. Cold bit into Aegon's wrist, though gauntlet. He pressed. Blackfire's heavier mass forced spear down. Night King pivoted, weightless. End of shaft, snapping toward Aegon's knee. He leapt, parried with pommel, reversed stroke, stabbed. Spear again met blade halfway. Contact exploded into web of icy mist. They circled. Vagar banked overhead, unable to strike for fear of incinerating Ryder. Visenya shouted but could not intervene. Giant bodyguards turned back but stumbled as flaming arrows peppered them. Rangers upon ridge rained support. Night King jabbed. Aegon batted aside, riposted, scored shallow gouge along frosted abdomen. Blue light flared in the wound, then dulled. Not enough. Spear swept low. Aegon hopped. The slope betrayed him. Boot slid. Night King seized opening, thrust at chest. Aegon twisted. Spear slid along breastplate, etched white line. Cold burned through metal, biting flesh. Pain catastrophic. But as spear point tore free, Brandon emerged, having limped forward, clutching a snapped dragonglass spearhead like dagger. He plunged it into the Night King's exposed flank, burying to hilt. Frost screamed, an actual sound, like glaciers calving. Night King staggered, eyes wide. He pivoted, backhanded Brandon with gauntlet. The bastard flew. Smacked snow, unmoving. Aegon roared, a wordless promise. He slashed Blackfire horizontally. Blade met spear halfway just below tip and sheared through enchanted ice. Shard skipped off, spinning away. Night King looked at broken weapon, then at Aegon. Those blue eyes flashed something almost human. Dismay? Rage? Aegon lunged, thrusting straight for heart. Blackfire struck. But Valyrian steel did not sink. It halted upon invisible barrier. Aegon felt resistance more mental than material. A glacial shield of will alone. He leaned harder, screaming. Frost crawled up blade toward hilt, silvering the black steel. If it reached his hands, blade might shatter. He gritted teeth. Summoned thought of Visenya, of Rhaenys, of Balerion, of warmth of Dragonstone's cliffs. Fire blossomed inside chest, not fury, but love. Steel flared crimson, molten vines pulsing. Frost cracked. With final heave, Blackfire slid through. The Night King's eyes blinked once. Blue cracked like glass struck by pebble. Light bled out, drifting skyward in shimmering motes. Body stiffened. Fissures zigzagged across limbs. Then entire form exploded into snow-fine particles, drifting down upon battlefield like second snowfall. Spear shaft, severed, toppled useless. Silence rippled outward. For breathless seconds, nothing moved. Then, across valley, whites collapsed en masse. Giants stilled mid-swing. Spiders crumbled. Ice Lieutenant attempted to raise sword, but its own arm disintegrated, scattering crystal dust. Undead wyverns still struggling with Yorick's froze mid-lunge, wings fracturing, carcass plummeting. On ridges, men gaped. Aegon stood alone amidst whirl of glittering snow that was not snow. His armor steamed, frost patches melting to rivulets. He exhaled and saw breath for first time since battle's onset. He looked down. Blackfire's edge remained whole, though frost scars marred its dark sheen. He limped to Brandon. Rangers reached first, turning the bastard over. Brandon's eyes fluttered open. Blood-streaked hairline, but smile crooked his mouth. "Tell my lord brother," he croaked. "Giants still remember names of men who fight at their side." Aegon clasped his hand. "They will sing it to every hearthfire in Winterfell." He squeezed gently. Brandon's pulse fluttered, then strengthened. Life, not death, took hold. Visenya landed Vagar. She leapt down, striding across drift of crystal dust. She looked at Aegon, then at silent battlefield. "Is it finished?" Aegon scanned horizon. Whites lay inert, host broken. Frost storm dissipated, revealing early dawn's blush. But memory of visions cautioned him. The Night King is slain. Yet the long night authored many pages. Another could rise. Visenya considered, then shook head. "Not while dragons soar and obsidian armories line every gate. We will guard the north until spring melts bones of winter's ambition." Rhaenys joined on foot, cheeks streaked with soot. She watched dawn flame across sky in pinks and golds. "Spring," she whispered. I had almost forgotten its colors. Soldiers began to cheer now, timid first, then uproarious. Sound rolling like surf across valley. Free folk hugged sworn brothers, giant survivors knuckled tears. Rangers dropped to knees in shock prayer. Above them, Balerion, Miraxes, Vhagar, and Yorick's formed circle, beating wings in slow victory cadence. Ash from burned whites mingled with crystalline dust, creating swirling halo that caught sunrise, painting air with shimmering kaleidoscope. Aegon turned face upward, savoring warmth on battered skin. He knew realms south still awaited his dragon banners. Lords who would resist his claim, wars of men with grievances, petty compared to what night almost stole. But those could wait. For this breath, kingdom was a chorus of living hearts. Torrhen Stark approached, snow crunching under boots. He removed fur-lined helm, revealing gray-flecked hair matted to brow. He knelt on one knee before Aegon. "Dragon Lord," he said, voice thick, "you saved the North. I, Torrhen, called King of Winter. Bend knee and swear fealty to House Targaryen, now and forever, so long as the realm endures." The words rang loud, carried by hush. Aegon inhaled. He helped Torrhen stand. No flamboyant proclamations. Merely, "Rise, Lord of Winterfell, and Warden of the North." Their clasped hands sealed pact, forged not by conquest but by dawn shared. Around them, snow continued to fall. Soft and ordinary at last. Men began to gather fallen, tend wound, extinguish lingering fires. Maesters hurried forth with satchels, their science now triumphant partner to myth. Visenya sheathed dark sister, stepped beside her brother. 5 hours? She teased, faint grin. Our story may stretch longer yet. Aegon laughed. Sudden and bright. Let scribes worry length. We have realms to knit and graves to fill. He gazed across valley, carpeted in broken ice. But today, let's simply breathe. The wind answered, no longer brittle or spiteful. It rustled banners of dragon and wolf now flying side by side, carrying smoke of campfires rather than ruin. Somewhere out among the drifts, a lark dared sing. Thin, but insistent. First bird song of a new age. And that was enough. Ka-Kay. Snowmelt slithered along fissures of the valley floor in thin, silvery threads, steaming where it touched the charred remains of the Night King's host. 1,000 small rivulets hissed against blackened ice and hissed again when they met the embers still glowing beneath sheets of obsidian slag. The drifts that had smothered the valley for a generation of winters settled, sank, and sloughed away beneath a timid sun. Pale runnels of water traced new maps through powder and soot. Here and there, a gust of wind kicked up ash. Some born of ordinary flame, some from the sudden shatter of frozen flesh at the moment the frost monarch fell. And jeweled particles of ice glittered in the morning light like shards of broken constellation. The living moved slowly, half stunned by victory and half fearful that any careless cry of triumph might reawaken the nightmare. Black brothers paced among inert cadavers, dragging them into heaps where giant volunteers tore spruce from the forest edge to fuel pyres that would burn for days. Northern levies filed past with picks and mattocks, breaking apart the largest chunks of glassy ice to clear makeshift roads. Free folk tribes gathered in ragged circles under improvised banners, bits of woven grass, owl feathers, or the antlers of a fallen elk, waiting for promised safe passage behind the wall. On a slope of melted snow and steaming peat, maesters bent over stretchers, cutting fur cloaks into bandages while passing flasks of poppy sleep from hand to shaking hand. The raw tang of char and dragon flame still clung to the air. When men exhaled, it felt less like breath and more like a question answered only by silence. Aegon Targaryen walked among them, helm tucked beneath his arm, white hair matted with sweat and streaks of soot. The gash across his breastplate where the Night King's spear had scraped still glittered with frost crystals. But warmth seeped through slowly, melting their feeble hold. He spoke with captains, patted the shoulders of free folk boys scarcely old enough to lift a spear, clasped hands with Night's Watch brothers, whose brothers would never rise from the valley floor. Some dared smiles, more simply stared at him, at the dragons wheeling overhead, at a horizon finally unclenched. Hope, Aegon realized, was a stranger to these men. He could see them measuring its shape like travelers tasting foreign fruit for the first time. Near the heart of the battlefield, Brandon Snow sat propped against the scorched trunk of a toppled pine, his ribs bandaged in sealskin strips, laced tight by Maester Edwis. The bastard's face was green-white, but his dark eyes were lively, following every drift of light across the field, as though trying to memorize the exact hour when death reversed its claim. Icebane lay across his knees, Beneath cracked obsidian, the blade's smoky core shimmered faintly, as if alive to its deed. Aegon knelt beside him. "Pain? On invitation," Brandon rasped, voice hoarse. "Every breath reminds me I am no white." "You were nearly a dead hero," Edwys muttered, fussing over a fresh poultice. "A heavier blow in your lungs would be soup." "Soup can still hold breath," Brandon countered, teeth flashing. "I'll drink broth tonight and call it kin." Aegon chuckled. "That rare music of unburdened mirth. Rest. The North will need songs, and your tongue remains sharper than any spear." "Vanarwani." Brandon looked out over the valley. "Songs? Let them remember the smell. Even a fool would think twice before summoning winter's wrath again." Edwys tightened one last knot and rose. Satisfied. "A hot meal and proper shelter," he said, "or those ribs knit crooked." "House Snow is crooked by birth," Brandon replied, fingers brushing the bandage. Aegon straightened. "Shelter we have in abundance south of the wall. But first we must see our new allies safely through it." He extended a hand. Brandon clasped, gripped once, released. Visenya and Rhaenys awaited him on a rise overlooking a half-frozen tarn. Vagar stretched her wings there, settling into a crouch that cracked surrounding ice like eggshell. Meraxes perched farther downslope, tail lazily sweeping plumes of melting snow. Balerion kept to the sky, basking high in diminishing thermals, black wings carving circles of ownership into the brightening blue. Visenya's dark armor was webbed with smoke lines, and one splotch of seared mail steamed against her ribs. Yet her poise remained unbent. "The pyres are nearly ready," she reported. "Our wildling cousins insist on burning their dead separately, with weirwood branches if we have any to spare." "We will spare them," Aegon said. "A man should bury his kin by his own rights, else resentment seeds itself in fresh graves." Rhaenys glanced toward the low ridge, where free folk clustered around 3 living giants, who knelt to assist children, binding talismans of bone and stone. "They seem few and meek compared to tales," she observed. "Meekness is seldom bred from plenty," said Aegon. "They have endured hunger that would snap the spines of lesser folk. Show them open gates and winter-stocked granaries, and they will grow formidable again." "Formidable enough to threaten our hold," Visenya challenged. "Or formidable enough to strengthen it," Aegon returned. "I have seen what weak men do when offered only chains. Better to welcome them before desperation teaches them hatred." Rhaenys' smile was soft. She had always been the sister who saw wounded hearts before armored ones. "I will ride Meraxes to Eastwatch," she said. "Open the Sally Gate, guide the mothers and babes first. Torches every 50 paces through the tunnel, warm broth at the far end. Let them know the dragon's breath need not scorch." Visenya raised an eyebrow. "And who commands those who stay behind to watch the forest?" "The Night King fell, but stragglers remain." "I will," she replied. "Arax and Yorix can patrol low, torching any carcass with eyes still bright. The dragons are tired, but not so tired their flame fails spark duty." "Bane." Aegon touched her gauntlet. "Do it, but keep to high passes. We are guests in these woods still, and we do not yet know whose watchfires burn beneath the pines." She nodded, pivoted, and strode downslope toward Meraxes, calling her squire to fetch spare harness straps. Snow hissed under her greaves, like parchment set to slow flame. Visenya watched her go. "You trust kindness too easily. And you trust fear," Aegon said. "Between us, the realm will find the balance." From the north, a fresh wind rolled, no longer blade-edged but cool and bracing, scented with pine sap and distant salt from the shivering sea. The breeze set banners flapping. The 3-headed dragon of Targaryen red, the gray direwolf, the silver kraken of Manderley tridenting a field of green. Among them newly stitched rags on driftwood poles bore crude marks, spiral suns, blue handprints, the skull of a screech owl. Symbols of tribes once thought half-myth south of the wall now stood shoulder to shoulder with highborn sigils. At that sight, unease flickered across Visenya's stern mask. Aegon followed her gaze. Names change, banners fade. Winter is the great equalizer, and it bowed to us." Winter bowed, she conceded, "but men are another matter. The southern kings will test us anew when word of this victory reaches their halls. They may bend knee out of awe for dragons, but in their bones, they will resent a dragon king who calls wildlings his allies." "Then let them resent," Aegon said. "While they measure my policy, I will measure their armies." She inclined her head, dark amusement licking her lips. "A conqueror's patience. Hard-learned," he replied. Thunder rumbled overhead, Balerion descending in vast spirals. He landed in a clearing of steam, molten earth crunching beneath his talons where dragonfire had softened stone. Aegon approached, laid a gloved hand against the massive black cheek. The old dragon's eye rolled to regard him, a furnace eye swirling with crimson motes. Aegon felt the vibration of the beast's breath travel up his arm, deep, contented, though weariness tremored underneath. He rasped a string of soothing valerian. Balerion exhaled a plume of smoke that parted around Aegon's shoulders like an affectionate sigh. At sunset, the pyres were lit. Giant hands tossed whole spruce trunks upon the flames, and scents of resin and pitch filled the air. Ash plumed skyward, swirling into evening winds that carried it toward the white line of the wall. Rangers saluted each new gout of fire, tapping the butts of their spears against snow in solemn rhythm. Free folk keen their wordless dirges, low minor melodies that trembled like wind through cracked stone. Within the ring of flames, a hush fell that felt neither somber nor joyous. Rather, it was the hush of a world inhaling after holding its breath for too long. Later, in a pavilion of wool and boiled leather, erected just beyond the pyre's reach, the first council of the living convened. Aegon sat cross-legged upon a layered pile of furs. At his right, Torrhen Stark, still clad in scarred mail mottled with frost-burnished dents. At Aegon's left, Gorm the Wise Psalm, elected voice of the free folk. A wiry woman with streaks of chalk white in her raven hair and a necklace of raven bones around her throat. Her lean face bore a scar shaped like a lightning bolt down her cheek. It puckered when she smiled, which was not often. Behind them stood Visenya, arms folded, dark sister's hilt glinting. Rhaenys had not yet returned from the wall. Her absence felt like a cooling hearth in the close quarters of the council. Maester Edwys served as scribe, his stylus scratching hurriedly across strips of tanned vellum, illuminated by oil lamps. The low ceiling sagged under snow weight. From time to time, pitches of wind rattled the hide walls. Outside, beyond a dozen snow-capped mounds, lay the Valley of the Dead, though soon nothing would remain but smolder. Aegon opened his palms to the council. "Our first concern is the safety of the free folk passing south. Eastwatch's stores might sustain 10,000 souls for a fortnight. But soon, we must move families deeper into the Gift, perhaps as far as Long Lake and the Last River." Lord Stark. Torrhen leaned forward. White Harbor sealed granaries against Greyjoy raiders last autumn. They stand full. Riverland crops will follow come thaw. The North will not let children starve. Gorm's gravel voice cut through. "You speak for Kneelers. We have mistrusted castles that bristle with spears since the first shadow of the wall fell across our birthplaces." Torrhen's eyes gleamed in lamplight. "Trust is forged, not spoken. You fought beside our banners. Now share our hearths. And if tomorrow you order your guards to seize our sons for ransom or levy?" Aegon interjected. "Then you take that levy to me. My judgment will be swift." His tone was iron. Any house of the South that breaks faith with the free folk breaks faith with the crown. Gorm studied Aegon the way a hawk studies the currents before a dive. "Crown, you say? You mean to rule beyond the North now?" "Nebdum." A low murmur rippled through assembled captains. Valerions, Manderleys, Karstarks, Swan bannermen from the Vale who had marched with Sir Corlys northward. Many had not yet spoken aloud what all suspected, that the Dragon Lord had not flown across the sea solely to rescue strangers from ancient myth. Aegon met her gaze. "When my ancestors carved old Valyria out of fire, they learned that dragons unbound by purpose become beasts. Likewise, kingdoms without unifying will fracture at their first wound. Westeros will bleed again if divided. I would see it healed, from Doran's red mountains to the cliffs of the Iron Isles. Not. Visenia's expression did not shift, but her eyes warmed. This was the vision she had always kindled. A single realm hammered into shape by conquest and crowned by dragons. Yet she said nothing. Let his words weigh themselves. Torin inhaled. The North will march beside you. We owe a debt beyond blood. Yet you must speak plainly. Do you seek homage from the southern kings or dominion? Both, Aegon answered. And I will offer them choice. Kneel freely, or break upon my flame as the mists broke upon winter's sun. The tent fell hushed. Maester Edwis' stylus scraped. Gorm tilted her head. And what of us? Will free folk bend or stand apart? You stood with us when the dead advanced, Aegon replied. I ask no more obeisance than any other house. Keep your lands, pay your due tithe, answer the realm's summons in times of war. The free folk may govern themselves under their own chiefs and laws, so long as those laws do not extort or enslave. No Lord South will own you, and no stone walls will bar your path should you choose to roam. The wall's gates will open for traitors, not just crows. You? Visenia's eyebrow arched at the boldness. Torin rubbed a thumb across the wolf sigil on his belt. Gorm's scar rippled. Freedom in trade, freedom in wander. Your tithe. A token tax. Grain or furs, Aegon said. Less than the price winter has already stolen. She considered, then spread her palms, bare except for bone rings. Let the singing spearheads choose. If they follow me, we give your vow a season to prove. One broken word, and our old roads reopen across your fields in blood. Dimnor. Then the burden lies with me to keep my word, Aegon said. She rose, bowed briefly from the waist, stiff but genuine. So speak we all. She departed, tossing hide flap aside to greet the moonlit cold. After she left, Visenya looked down at her brother. Promises are spun easier than steel, but stronger when kept, he said. She exhaled through her nose. Then we'll see them kept. For now, triage. Send rangers north of the valley tomorrow. Destroy every corpse. Exploding ice shards are none of my desire. Dabnaramayal, Torin added, and dispatch ravens to the Shadow Tower and Westwatch by the bridge. Confirm the dead fell there as well. Aegon turned to Edwis. Send 2 ravens to King's Landing also. Though they know me not, let them learn how winter parted for dragons. Edwis's quill paused. King's Landing has but one king. King Heron the Black yet sits in his 5-towered monstrosity. Ernhowl, Aegon corrected. Heron hoards the riverlands, not King's Landing. The Iron Throne stands empty aftermath of Argiloc's storm-washed fall. A subtle smile touched his mouth. I mean to claim it before another does. Visenya's grin mirrored steel unsheathed. Torin glanced between them. How many dragons? He asked. Enough, Visenya promised. Gainan? 3 days passed beneath skies that brightened by minutes each dawn, no longer bruised with sorcery, but crisp and cloud-strewn like any northern spring, unclasping one thaw at a time. Pyres burned low. The valley buzzed with foragers harvesting untouched trees. Charcoal pits smoked under tarpaulins. On the second morning, a flight of ravens arrived from Castle Black, their scrolls filled with frantic praise at the collapse of every corpse along the curtain's length. Men wept openly when they learned the dead who had besieged the Shadow Tower simply fell where they stood. Brittle as brittle corn. Smaller knots of white still flickered in the haunted forest, but with each day they grew less bolder, more confused as if their unholy will starved in absence of command. Dragonglass arrow patrols culled them relentlessly. When the first column of free folk reached the gate of Eastwatch, Rhaenys and Meraxes greeted them from the stone battlements. She had lined the tunnel with braziers every 10 paces. Hot broth waited beyond. Cots, boiled blankets, fresh small clothes woven in the south. Skeptical wildlings stepped under the wall's shadow like trespassers at a god's feast, yet none forced them, none cursed them. Night's Watch brothers guided them with lanterns and half-unbelieving smiles. The stories of dragons raising whole towns found no ground here. Men who had awoken each dawn to wonder if their children's bones might freeze by dusk, now saw the impossible. Southern quilts, candled hearths, the promise of farmland beyond snowline. Rainy stood above, cloak whipping in updraft, serene as dawn's star. Some free folk called her Fire Swan after that. On the fourth day, Aegon led a procession across the plain. Beneath new banners of direwolf and dragon, they walked a mile-long circuit around the cooling battlefield, each contingent halting before the stark heart tree newly planted upon a rise of melt-moistened soil. The sapling had been lovingly carried from the heart of Winterfell's godswood, its roots bound in frost-cured burlap. Bran Snow himself oversaw the placement, though wounds yet hampered him. 10 giants scooped black earth, lowering the tree into a cradle facing the dawn direction. When the sapling stood upright against the sky, its thin red leaves fluttering like shy flames, both Northmen and wildlings knelt. Even some Southron knights bowed heads, if for no reason but the hush heavy with meaning. Aegon addressed them. His speech held no oratory flourishes. He was never a poet, but his voice carried calm conviction. We gather where darkness reigned. Let this soil remember fire and frost. Let this tree draw life from the ashes beneath. Let each man here pledge that, when next a shadow rises, dragon and wolf, crow and freeman, giant and child, will stand together once again. This is our pact, bound by heartblood and tempered in ice. They raised voices in assent, a roar like spring thunder. An hour later, ravens took flight from Eastwatch, wings beating toward every great castle. Their messages bore a seal, 3-headed dragon quartered upon a direwolf field. They carried the words of victory over death and an invitation, or ultimatum. To every throne from the Reach to the Vale to the Iron Islands, the Dragon King comes. Choose your hour of fealty. Wah! The march south began with the drip of icicles, and ended each day in soft soil camps, where frost withdrew from earth at touch of midday sun. The column was vast. Rangers, free folk hunters, stark bannermen, smiths driving wagons of forged dragon glass arrowheads, giants striding at intervals like walking towers, and, always overhead, the silhouettes of dragons that kept watch against raiders or the last ghosts of winter. Each evening they halted near rivers swollen with meltwater. There Aegon ordered temporary bridges raised from felled spruce and bound in iron chain carried on pack mules. Night's Watch engineers oversaw, teaching free folk how to lay anchor stones. Skills flowed both ways. Wildlings taught black brothers how to weave birch bark canoes for swift crossing. Small fraternities formed around every fire, languages mixing. Highborn accents of old castle with the lilting skull song of then tribes, the guttural croak of giant speech echoing above all. In the second week, they reached the Gift's southern border, where mossy watchposts built by Brandon, the builder's descendants, once marked tithing stations. Many lay in ruin, roofs collapsed under decades of neglect. Torrhen Start decreed their timber repurposed. Barracks for returning farmers, family halls for those free folk who wished to settle. Some tribes refused still. They preferred tundra hunts and summer pilgrimage. But others, especially mothers with newborns, saw in empty hearths the promise of a gentler tomorrow. Aegon ceded them rights to homestead parcels in perpetuity, conditional upon stewardship of the land for the realm's larder. He appointed Gorm the Wyesp Song as warden of those northern reaches, a title she accepted warily, but with a grin his dragons could not match. Pigeons and hawks brought replies from the south. Some came in uneasy deference. House Aaron's Lord Ronald sent congratulations, but warned that the Vale's passes remained snowbound until late spring, requesting time to deliberate. Others offered stout pledges. The young Lord of Riverrun, Edmund Tully, wrote that Riverlanders remembered Argilacus' despotism all too well, and would meet dragons as liberators. The Tyrell regent from Highgarden responded with polite curiosity, asking only for proof that the Night King's fall was no tavern tale. Aegon dispatched a flight of ravens bearing shards of crystallized frost that had once been an ice lieutenant's helm. Let the Reach study that miracle beneath warm roses. Not all answers were friendly. From Black Harren came brittle scorn. The Ironborn King refused audience, boasting that his black towers had defied every invader from the east and would stand long after dragons rotted in their lairs. Aegon read Harren's scroll aloud to Visenya beside a campfire near Greywater Watch. She listened, lips pulling into thin smile. "When we burn his walls," she said, "let the last stone crack upon that arrogance." "We will give him one more chance to yield," Aegon replied. "Stone need not melt if pride will." Visenya snorted but did not argue. She knew his mercy was seldom endless. That night, a hush fell widely across camps. Under cloud-flecked moon, Aegon walked alone beyond perimeter torches. He found Brandon Snow sitting on a stump, ribs bound but otherwise hardy, stroking a plain horn head carved from an auroch's bone. He gestured for Aegon to sit beside him. For a while they said nothing, listening to frogs creak awake along thawed marsh. Brandon spoke first. "When I was a child, my wet nurse told me the greatest danger of winter was not the cold, but the silence. How stillness can drive a man to forget summer's laughter. Last month, I tasted that silence in my own marrow. We might not forget so quickly." "We mustn't," Aegon said. He accepted the horn. Its edge was buffed silk smooth. "What will you play?" "Nothing loud. Mayhap a lullaby for ghosts." He raised the horn and breathed into it. The note was deep but gentle, like longboat oar dipped in calm waters. It drifted over the sleeping host, weaving a dream of hearth smoke and half-remembered lullabies. Aegon listened, and for first time since stepping onto the valley floor, his shoulders unclenched. When the last note died, Brandon lowered the horn. "South Ron's songs now," he said, half-smile. "Your queens will want them for coronations." "Only one queen," Aegon corrected gently. 8 Dragonstone the high priests. "Preach that kings who marry sisters keep Valyrian blood pure, but Westeros cares little for old Valyrian laws. Better to crown one king, 2 queens in council." "None. Queens not wives," Brandon mused. "Bold. It will scandalize Old Town septons." "Let them compose new sermons," Aegon said, rising. "We rewrite the tales." Ugh. By mid-spring the army reached Moat Cailin, its basalt causeways and weather-pitted towers rising from mirror-still pools. Engineers groaned at the sight of broken ramparts, soaked, crumbled into tinder of black stone by centuries of salt wind. But giants waded into knee-deep water, braced sagging parapets. Men laid new beams of cedar cut from the wolfswood, while rangers with bows lined ramparts for the first time in many winters. Aegon declared the fortress the kingdom's northern lock, a bastion not against Northmen, but against any shadow that might yet creep south from the lands of always winter. He left a garrison of Night's Watch veterans and wildling scouts sworn together, a symbolic union to keep vigilance honest. Visenya took that night to inspect Dark Sister's edge beneath torchlight. She found it still flawless, though along the fuller a faint swirl of frost-etched pattern remained, a relic of her duel with Icy Wyvern. She traced it with thumb, half-grim smile. "Proof," she whispered, "that steel sometimes remembers what flesh forgets." Aegon roused early next morning, mounting Balerion for a sweep above neck marshes. From 300 feet he surveyed miles of pale fog drifting across mangrove labyrinths. Somewhere to the east towers of Harrenhal glimmered like black fangs on the horizon. Soon, but not yet. First he must secure the fealty of Riverlords, for he meant to spare their fields from Dragonflame if they opened them willingly. He turned Balerion southwest, following the sinuous course of the Green Fork. Along banks he spied farmsteads half drowned yet alive, smoke curling from chimneys. Peasant children waved astonishment at the dragon's shadow. Some toppled backward into mud. Others sprinted for cottages. He wondered what stories they might spin tonight, that a living storm demon circled above, or that hope had come on black wings. At midday he sat down near the Twins, the Frey castles straddling the river with narrow stone bridges like crossed spears. Lord Walden Frey, wizened yet cunning-eyed, greeted him with trembling courtesy. The sight of Balerion sniffing turrets while servants quaked below parted lips faster than any threat. Walden pledged fealty on the spot, unlocking gates and dispatching ravens to his many sons. A spiderweb of kinship ties that blanketed central Westeros. He poured wine for Aegon in a draught hall smelling of tallow and old eel pie. News travels slower than wings, Walden said, voice rasping. "But if even half the tales of ice ghosts and your dragon's fire are true, only a fool would stand alone now." "Then wisdom fills your cup," Aegon replied. He accepted the old lord's pledge, and in return left instructions for grain barges to ferry north to Moat Cailin, the first of many convoys to refill pantries ravaged by winter. One pledge led to another. In River Run's great hall, Edmund Tully fell to one knee before Aegon's dais. His bannermen, the Blackwoods, Brackens, and Mallisters, followed suit, some less eagerly. The Blackfish of River Run, Sir Bernard, volunteered to guide the dragon host through the red grass lanes flanking the God's Eye. There they would parley with the men of Harren, and if parley failed, they would burn the Black Towers stone by stone. Before leaving River Run, Aegon held audience with a visitor unexpected. A child of perhaps 11 years, hair the color of tarnished copper, eyes pale green. She called herself Lyanna Rivers and claimed descent from the fire of old who had visited the Riverlands generations past. She begged passage north to see the heart tree sapling planted in the Valley of Ghosts. Aegon, intrigued, granted her escort and a small purse of silver. "Carry our story with you," he said. "Let songs of hope bloom faster than weeds of fear." She curtsied, eyes wide, and promised to speak wonders along every road. 2 mornings later, Rhaenys arrived leading a column of Valyrian bronze armored foot. Fresh recruits from Dragonstone and Driftmark answering late summons after weather improved. Their arrival revived weary soldiers, and their tales of calm seas and full nets soothed rumors that war had drained the island of its life. She brought other gifts. Parchments sealed in purple wax, each bearing pledge of trade from Pentoshi and Corthine merchants. Eager to bargain once winters, twilight myths reached their perfumed spices walk. Dragons soared, markets stirred. Aegon smiled at the efficient diplomacy of coin. The host resumed its march south, banners multiplying like early blossoms. Yet as they neared the God's Eye, an immense lake whose glassy gray surface reflected swirling storm clouds, tidings grew grim. Scouting parties returning from the Blackwater Rush reported villages deserted, their wells poisoned, orchards hacked down. Ironborn reavers loyal to Harren had raised everything within a foot of his shadow. Refugees streamed toward the coming army, peasants with caved-in cheeks, women clutching infants too listless even to cry, men whose backs were cross-hatched by new whip scars. Some bore hides scorched to blister by tar fire. They spoke of black-armored soldiers who laughed beneath iron skull helmets, of halls set ablaze with wood still green, so that smoke smothered lungs slowly. Aegon listened to each tale with jaw clenched. At the 7th village his patience ended. He climbed Balerion against a sky fracturing with stormlight and steered for Harrenhal. From above, the castle resembled a monstrous claw clutching a field of graves. Massive towers of fused stone, built by Harren's grandsire using saltwater-dampened sand so they'd withstand siege fire, soared grim and immune to the passage of seasons. Balconies hung like black teeth over courtyards ablaze with torches. Smoke curled from forge stacks. Squadrons of iron-born crossbowmen manned siege scorpions on parapets. Harren must have long anticipated dragons. Indeed, as Balerion approached the outer curtain, ballista bolts shrieked upward. Shafts the thickness of a man's leg, tipped in barbed iron. Aegon banked, fire trailing from the dragon's nostrils to melt projectiles midair into cascades of molten metal. He circled once, twice, studying angles, counting defense posts. He could raise the fortress this hour, but each bolt risked Balerion's wounded wing still scarred inside, and he had given his word. One more chance to yield. He guided Balerion to land upon a grassy barrow outside arrow range, unfurled a white banner edged in red. Servants from Harrenhal emerged, cowled figures bearing a palanquin draped in black silk. Tall iron helmets flanked it, welded with grotesque faces. Within lounged King Harren himself, thin now but still towering. Leathery skin stretched across saber cheekbones. His eyes were predator yellow. His voice, when he spoke, carried across the wind. "Dragon Lord, I see you survived your frolic with frost wraiths. Go north again, where your heroics matter. These lands bend to storm and salt, not fire." Aegon raised his helm. "Storm and salt avail you nothing against living wrath. The north stands with me, the riverlands too. Surrender your crown, yield your castles, and I will grant you and your sons life in exile on the Iron Isles." Heron's laugh was a rusted hinge. "Life in exile? I forged these towers with bloodier coin than you will ever own. I have 5 sons, each sworn to defend these walls. We will feast on dragon meat before we bend." Mentor's show. Aegon's stare remained calm. "Then you will feast on smoke." He bowed his head once, a gesture of final courtesy, then mounted Balerion and turned skyward. Storm clouds burst open, unleashing a deluge as if the heavens sensed the fire to come and sought to quench it. Rain slicked Balerion's scales. Streaks of steam hissed. Yet dragonfire burns even in tempest. Aegon hovered above the tallest tower, Kingspire, where Heron and his sons no doubt watched, smug in Blackstone's legendary resistance. Below, ballistas creaked again, bolts launching. Balerion roared. In one breath he loosed a torrent of flame hotter than any forge, tinted deep violet near the source, then gold, then white so bright the rain itself flashed to scalding steam bursts. The fire washed over Kingspire, kissed fused stone that had never known true dragon flame. The tower glowed red, then white, then cracks snaked across its surface. Spiderwebs glowing from within as moisture trapped inside stone turned to explosive vapor. With a shriek like worlds tearing, Kingspire split. Chunks of molten masonry rained into courtyards. Ironborn soldiers scattered like ants from kicked anthill. Another breath, another tower. Stone wept lava. Windows belched gouts of flame. Inside, wooden beams incinerated. Trapped air combusted into half-heard screams. Those not burnt outright leapt, their bodies swallowed by swirling smoke. Aegon's resolve never wavered. He counted each blow. First for the children bound to pyres and fields. Second for the women torched in longhouses. Third for men dragged behind horses by ironborn reavers. Each memory fed Balerion's furnace. When the last tower collapsed inward and roofs caved, he withdrew. Rain hammered embers, hissing, but could not save. That evening, camped a mile distant, he summoned surviving Riverlord captains. They watched orange glow ripple across clouds where Harrenhal burned. Aegon spoke few words. Those who surrendered would find clemency. Those who resisted would kneel or fall. The Riverlords knelt. Visenya arrived after midnight, dismounting Vhagar amid drift of soot. She smelled of smoke and satisfaction. Rhaenys herds prisoners, she reported. 3 of Heron's sons survived. Scorched but breathing. "What is your will?" Aegon's face remained unreadable, though flame reflection danced in his pupils. "Send them to the Iron Isles as warning. Salt kings may rule waves, but tides obey storms I command. Let them remember what dragonfire wrought upon their proudest fortress." "Mercy," Visenya echoed, not judgmental, curious. "Fear alone breeds uprisings," he said. "Better they tell truth." She nodded. "When do we turn west?" "Soon. First we must see Old Town Sept and decide whether the 7 approve of dragons." She laughed once. "The maesters will issue treatises before the first egg hatches. Let them." Aegon looked skyward where thrumming stars flickered behind smoke veils. After all, knowledge is fire too, if wielded boldly. Whoa. Months passed in tireless motion. Rubble clearing, treaty sealing, fates of surrender, shatter of ironborn axes laid at dragons' feet. At King's Landing, a sparsely settled fishing inlet called Blackwater at the time, Aegon ordered a wooden palisade raised. There he drove a freshly forged sword of Valyrian steel into the sandy hilltop and named the spot Aegonfort. Under its banner, stone by stone, a new seat would rise, one uniting crownlands and riverlands into a single heart. On a summer dawn, gold and orange, banners of the Reach arrived bearing olive branches in deference to the dragons. Tyrell regents bent knee, offering stores of grain and Sweetwater vintages in exchange for peaceful transition. House Arryn descended from Gulltown passes the next month, bringing Valley Knights sworn to defend the fledgling capital. Even Dorne, proud and headstrong sent envoys. They would not yield yet, but they brought sand-steed steeds and baskets of crushed dates, a pledge that conversation remained possible. Only the Iron Isles remained recalcitrant, harrying coasts until Visenya rode Vigar across the Sunset Sea and toppled one longship harbor after another until salt water boiled. The silence of the Isles fell quickly thereafter. Amid political torrents, Aegon never forgot the Valley of Ghosts. Each year, as winter's grip whispered again, he flew north with a small honor guard to stand beneath the heart tree grown thicker, its red leaves rustling like choruses. Sometimes, Brandon Snow joined him, scar still silver across brow, horn ever at hip. Giants would appear on ridgelines, raising broad palms in greeting. Free folk children now toddled through gift orchards, chasing cold-plumed goats. Night's Watch and wildlings shared ale on watchtower roofs, taking turns telling the story to each new recruit who doubted. Dragons had melted death. Snow remembered. On the 5th anniversary of that battle, a festival bloomed in King's Landing. They called it the Festival of Dawn. Lanterns of white parchment drifted over the Blackwater, each inscribed with names of those who perished in Frost Valley. Targaryen banners mingled with direwolf pennants and the bone spiral of Gorm's people. Maesters recorded attendance of 70,000 souls. Lords, small folk, sellswords, freedmen, they feasted on river trout and honeyed figs. Bards sang. A company of mummers reacted Brandon's duel with the Night King, though the giant puppet's proportions were charmingly poor and drew more laughter than dread. As dusk bled mauve, Aegon stood on a platform above the crowd. Beside him Visenya bore Dark Sister aloft. To her other side, Rhaenys held a braided torch gilded in silver. A hush settled. Aegon lifted his voice. 5 winters passed. An enemy older than hate marched south, and together we drove it beyond final sleep. Yet the long night lives in memory still, and that is well. For in memory we keep vigil, but we do not bow to fear. We raise houses, sow fields, charter ships to islands unknown. We marry our sons to daughters born of blood once called wild, and find no wildness in love. We speak many tongues, yet share one vow, that when darkness gathers again, and it will, we stand as one realm. He paused, letting the hush ripple. Tonight, we kindle flame to mark not an end, but a beginning. Rhaenys stepped forward, torch extended. Aegon took it, lifted the fire to the night, and with a single fluid motion, ignited a towering pyre built from driftwood and perfumed cedar. Flame flared golden, sparks spiraling skyward. Giants roared approval from positions along the capital's half-built walls. Children squealed. Even the sternest lords found hearts thumping. Suddenly, from above, a thunder of wings. Balerions soared across the harbor, trailing a comet tail of dark smoke. Vigar and Meraxes followed. Then 2 younger dragons hatched in the Dragonstone caverns, Sunfire and Shadowflame. They wheeled over the city, and as if by rehearsal, breathed gouts of colored fire. One gold, one indigo, into the sky, painting brief auroras against twilight. Gasps rose. 1,000 hands reached heavenward. In that moment, menace became wonder. Fear transmuted to awe. Aegon watched the faces. Northmen, river lords, fisherwomen from the Crackclaw, wildlings wrapped in new wool cloaks embroidered with oak leaves. Their eyes, reflecting fire, were bright not only with reverence but with possibility. He felt weight settle in chest. Not burden, but responsibility vast as any winter. Visenya caught his gaze, lips quirking. "You see it now," she murmured. "Yes. The price of forging a realm. The privilege," he corrected. He turned toward the roaring fire and whispered an old Valyrian prayer for warding against darkness. But this time, he did not ask the gods of dragonlords. He asked the old gods of wolfblood, the 7 of the Reach, the many-faced of Bravos, and even the silent weirwoods watching from distant snows. Packed among many, strong as ice. He smiled, lowering the torch. Far north, under dancing aurora, the heart tree rustled, leaves hissing like a low lullaby. Somewhere deep beneath that earth, embers of ancient ice might still slumber. But for now they dreamed quietly within their tomb of glass and melted sorrow. And across summer fields, under banners of dragon and wolf alike, the realm breathed in unison, not yet perfect, but alive, warm and wonderfully human against the vast dark tapestry of eternity. K. The night after the Festival of Dawn slipped into heavy quiet, the kind a bustling city rarely knew. King's Landing, still little more than the rough-hewn Aegon fort, a mile of wooden palisade, half-finished stone keeps, and muddy alleys speckled with fisher shacks, held its breath as celebrants dozed, sated with sweet wine and the warmth of fresh hopes. Only the harbor remained wakeful. Ropes creaked on pilings, gulls quarreled over scraps alight in braziers, and somewhere an oarsman tuned a salt-warped lute for the dawn watch. Soft lamplight flickered along the black water as if the river itself were stringing small lanterns in imitation of the sky. Aegon did not sleep. Atop the nascent red hill, a mound of packed earth, destined to cradle future walls of black and red stone, he paced barefoot upon damp planks of the royal pavilion. Canvas walls breathed with breeze. A brazier stood near the entrance, its embers reduced to faint ruby. Here he could look above half-raised parapets and watch Balerion roosting upon an outcrop beyond the fort's edge. Huge wings folded, neck curved like a midnight crescent. The big dragon's belly still glowed, dull red, where the earlier display of colored fire lingered in his furnace heart. Seeing that living mountain asleep, Aegon felt smaller than ever, but also certain. He was steward of something vast, not master. Stewardship demanded wakeful nights and restless thoughts. Footsteps scraped behind him. He turned, expecting Visenya's brusque silhouette, or perhaps Rhaenys fetching him to some pillow feast among victory-gladdened riverlord. Instead, Maester Edwys entered, night-cloak dusted with sawdust from construction scaffolds. The old man clutched a roll of parchment bearing the green wax seal of Old Town. His breath puffed white in the cool hour. "Forgive intrusion, your grace," he murmured. A rook arrived late. Lord Hightower's riders spurred through 3 changes to place it in my hands. Aegon gestured him nearer. Edwys placed the scroll on a small cedar writing table, weighed it with an iron candle holder. Wax cracked as Aegon peeled the seal. He skimmed quickly. By its end his brow furrowed. "Troubling?" Edwys ventured. "Troubling in its thinness," Aegon said. "The High Septon congratulates us on victory over the Night King, commends our valiant unity, and invites me to Old Town to receive the Seven's blessing. Yet nothing of allegiance, homage, or coin, only a blessing." He tapped the parchment. "A cautious hand pens this. One ready to praise whichever side stands tallest once tilt's end." Edwys inclined his head. "The Citadel counsels caution. Many archmaesters fear dragon rule might extinguish their independence." "Independence is smoke," Aegon replied. "You breathe it, think you hold it, but it drifts away. Old Town respects parchment, river lords respect swords." He gazed out toward the dark clumps of the Kingswood. "Still, I will go. Blessings cost little. Better to win hearts among the faith than let dissent take root in quiet cloisters." "Vimrian." Edwys hesitated. "Should I draft reply?" "Not yet. At dawn we depart for Dragonstone to review hatchery and the fleet. When we swing south again, we'll stop at Old Town. In my absence, keep Quills busy. Charters for free folk settlements, garrison rolls for river watch, and send word to Dorne that I wish parley beneath my own banners, not theirs." He raked fingers through silver blonde hair. "Visenya will protest. She'd storm Sunspear by flame and iron. But we offer the Viper olive branch first." Edwys bowed, but before he left, he produced another, smaller scroll. This rode with Old Town's bird, no seal, though spattered ink hints a maester's hand. Its contents are odd. Aegon unrolled it. The parchment smelled of pine resin, and dragged across its face were 2 lines in a hurried slanted script. "Beware the swords that whisper beneath the cedar floor. Ash hatches in shadow, when winter's breath is no more." No signature. He frowned. "Riddle Or warning? Possibly both, Your Grace. I ran the couplet past poets on Treasure Street. None claim authorship. Cedar floor, Aegon mused. Most halls in Old Town are oak, pine, or marble tile. Cedar. Perhaps some hidden crypt in the citadel, or the Starry Sept's prayer days. He folded the slip. Keep this between us for now. He looked again at Balerian's sleeping shadow. Whispers or no, we will walk those floors soon. Edwys departed. Aegon doused the brazier, breathing in last tendrils of charcoal. Across the slope, Candlethrob winked in Visinia's pavilion. He considered seeking counsel, but let the hours swallow that impulse. Some thoughts ferment best in solitude. Daybreak painted the harbor rose amber. Carpenters cursed because saws slipped on pitchy planks. Fishwives sang ribald jests to fluster fresh guards, and dragons filled the dawn with thunder. Balerion took flight first, tail swirling river fog into corkscrews. Meraxes followed, bronze hide, sparkling. Vigar rose last, slower, but with an echoing roar that rattled clay mortar in every chimney. Small folk rushed into streets, pointing their fear of midnight beasts overshadowed by pride that such wonders soared above their roofs. They did not yet know they lived at the hinge of ages, but they sensed something greater than any single man was taking shape with each wing beat. Below, Rhaenys stood near the new stone quay, hair bound with leather cord, speaking with Corlys Velaryon. The Lord of the Tides had assembled a ragged but agile fleet. 6 battered galleys seized from ironborn raiders, 3 swift Pentoshi cogs, and 2 formidable warships from Driftmark, Pride of the Tides and Silver Serpent. Corlys reported keel repairs nearly done. New masts stepped, dragonhead prows recarved in Targaryen fashion. Rhaenys listened, nodded, placed a hand upon his shoulder. Corlys smiled. The Silver Serpent might crow her own name across every ocean. But she answered Rhaenys with deeper loyalty than any ledger of coin. Aegon joined them. Corlys bowed low. Your Grace, by the morrow tide we sail. The narrow sea bows to your breath already. Only the Tyroshi linger at mischief. But they'll obey once they see Balerion's shadow gliding across waves. I'd prefer they obey for trade, Aegon said. But a shadow is good insurance. Rhaenys stepped closer. The hatchery reports Sunfire's clutch ready for turning. You might meet hatchlings before we return south. Her eyes gleamed, half motherly, half warrior. A realm of many dragons is stronger than a realm of 3. Stronger, Aegon agreed, and more dangerous if poorly husbanded. He squeezed her hand once. Take Meraxes over the fleet, and keep watch along the stepstones. I want no corsair daring to seize grain cutters bound for the north. I'll scorch their sails to cinders, she promised. Visenya approached then, dark sister slung casual across back. Dragons crowd sky. Sailors grow jittery. Best we 3 depart soon. Aegon inclined head. Corlys signaled dock hands, mooring lines slipped. Sails caught wind. Oars dipped in unified stroke. Dragons banked over departing hulls like guardian gargoyles, soaring off cathedral arches. Atop Balerion's neck, Aegon surveyed receding palisade. A rough fort today, tomorrow perhaps the greatest city Westeros would ever know. He imagined marble colonnades, grand staircases, towers to challenge even Dragonstone's ancient spires. But those belonged to architects yet unborn. For now, the wind smelled of pitch, river silt, and promise. They veered east across Blackwater Bay, then north along coast to Dragonstone. The flight took half a day. Sea glittered, free of ice for first full season in many. Dolphins rode bow wave beneath fleet. By late afternoon the volcanic isle rose, cliffs black-green against turquoise shallows. The fortress, carved centuries earlier in the shapes of dragons locked mid-roar, looked gentler beneath warm sun, although no less imposing. Landing upon the windswept courtyard, Aegon found Lady Laena Velaryon, barely 17, yet as poised as any courtier. She wore riding leathers, midriff dusted with soot from hatchery. Curtsying, she led them across bridge-like spine of stone dragons back into the heart of the breeding complex. There, he inhaled sulfur mingled with warm straw. Massive stone pans hummed with heat from natural lava vents. Above them, baskets of sand cradled 30 eggs, each the size of a man's fist, patterned in indigo, crimson mottled with black, or shimmering pearl. Lena explained rotation schedules, humidity spells gleaned from Valyrian scrolls, and newly designed iron tongs for safer turning. Her voice tremored when she spoke of probability curves. Each egg might or might not quicken. They would not all live. Yet she looked born to this delicate dread. Visenya listened, nodding grudging respect, though she believed steel and discipline far more reliable than incubators. She touched one egg, midnose speckled with silver. It pulsed faintly, radiating warmth into her palm. She closed her eyes, perhaps seeing memory of a time when Valyria's skies teemed with wings. Aegon asked Lena to double guard watch. No blade inside hatchery shorter than 3 inches parted from its scabbard. No torch allowed unsupervised. If these eggs perish to carelessness, he said, the realm may share that fate. She responded with solemn vow, then dared break protocol. Would his grace witness the youngling pits? Her cheeks flushed. They followed down sloping corridor into a low cavern, where 3 juvenile dragons prowled. Pale gold sunfire, the new hatch shadowflame, sleek charcoal hides shot with ember red, and little cloudburst, icy white with lavender flecks. They hissed but did not lunge, tails twitching as stable hands in heat-proof garb dangled goat carcasses over troughs. Aegon observed tenderly. Such creatures held future of house, maybe world. It also glimpsed hazard, each new wing to train double chance of disaster. They would need riders, loyal riders. That night, a feast warmed Dragonstone's long hall. Roast boar, honeyed oysters, spiced crabs. Minstrels plucked lutes. Still, talk slid to Old Town journey. Visenya prodded. The faith once anointed Andals who overthrew first men kings. If this new high septon balks at our polygamous ways, will you let him crown you? I ask for blessing, not permission, Aegon said. The faith binds hearts from Planky Town to Gull Town. Better they see Dragonlords honor the 7 than spit on them. Visenya sliced boar. 7 or 1, gods quake before dragons. Rhaenys, across table, smiled gently. But men quake before gods they understand. Let them see we kneel sometimes. Visenya grunted and poured wine. 2 weeks later, Aegon Visenya and a procession of 200 riders set southwest over the Reach. Balerion and Vhagar alternated watch. The juvenile dragons remained behind, guarded by Laena and Corlys' fleet. Rolling fields swept beneath them, bright carpets of sunflowers, tidy orchards, high grasslands speckled with sheep. The Reach's wealth sang in every orchard. Yet as they neared Old Town, patches of orchard lay withered, sign of late frost from winter just conquered. Peasants still mended fences burned by last year's iron-born raiders. Aegon noted each scar. Old Town at last. Broad Hightower, overshadowing colonnaded streets. Starry septs, marble dome gleaming, citadel spires swirling with ravens. Aegon landed beyond city gates, so as not to terrify citizens within narrow lanes. Balerion couched upon a strand of heath overlooking harbor. Representatives met them. Lord Manfred Hightower, gray, courteous cunning, and Grandmaster Orlan, stooped yet sharp-eyed. They bowed, albeit not knees to earth. We bid your grace the stars' blessings, Manfred said. Old Town's doors stand open. March through the Honeywine Way turned into triumphant procession. Townsfolk craned, children scurried behind columns, septa sprinkled rose petals. Yet at Aegon sensed tension. Some small folk crossed themselves, murmuring about Valyrian sorcerers. Farther ahead, groups of armored faith militant, warriors' sons, stars, and swords, lined streets, halberds polished. They saluted politely, but helmets hid expressions. At the starry sept, High Septon Belisarius awaited, a broad man clothed in crystal-beaded raiment. He radiated practiced serenity. Incense wafted. 7 crystal statues towered overhead. Ceremony commenced. Prayers, Anointing oil touched Aegon's brow, shoulders, palms. As Rhaenys predicted, Belisarius omitted mention of Aegon's dual marriage. Merely intoned two noble queens, in neutral cadence. Visenya concealed smirk. Rhaenys bowed head gracefully. Afterwards, Belisarius led them to a private alcove draped in sapphire silk. "You come as liberator," he said. "The seven rejoice. Yet some whisper dragons will swallow liberties like lambs." His eyes drifted toward Visenya's sword. "Liberties to worship remain untouched," Aegon said. "Faith militant keep peace under royal charter. So long as swords protect piety, not petty lordlings." Belisarius nodded, but his smile remained frail. "And the rumors of Wilding shamans reading Weirwood runes in King's Landing?" Aegon chuckled softly. "If a man prays to Weirwood or Seven-Pointed Star, I question only whether he keeps honor to neighbor. Beneath one crown all may kneel differently." The High Septon considered. "A generous philosophy. Yet, heresy can breed sedition. So can bread shortage," Visenya said, voice cool. "Food we have remedied. Heresy we meet with reason, then steel if reason fails." "Daimon die." Belisarius paled half a shade. "We are shepherds, not rebels." That evening, Hightower hosted banquet under towering lantern shrine. Dishes of lemon trout, pomegranate goose, almond cakes. Musicians played gentle harp, restrained so conversation might flow. Aegon danced with Lady Alicent Hightower. Visenya sparred witty repartee with Archmaester Veron on the ethics of dragonfire. Rhaenys charmed Old Town's stargazing order by promising dragons would allow them unprecedented aerial readings of constellations. Yet beneath polite veneer, watchers watched watchers. Aegon noted copper hair of a certain citadel acolyte trailing them discreetly. During toast he recognized another face glimpsed along harbor earlier. A lean sellsword with tattoo of scales along neck, unmistakable Braavosi design. Something brewed beneath cedar-paneled eaves. Late that night, quartered within a Hightower guest wing of aromatic cedar floors, Aegon dreamed uneasy. In dream he heard faint scraping, metal on wood, and murmured voices chanting. He awoke. Moonlight streaked lattice. He rose silently, barefoot across planks. A dull glow seeped from corridor crack. He eased door. Two robed figures stalked toward central stair carrying a black box, embossed with spiral sun. What? Aegon followed, drawing dagger but leaving heavier sword for stealth. They descended into library rotunda. Vaulted shelves lined with jarred hearts of oak. At hearth, third figure waited, tall, slender, wearing steel mask painted bone white. He whispered Valyrian words that curled like smoke. From box came faint thrumming, as though hive of hornets drummed wings inside. Aegon crept behind reading desk, glimpsed fourth conspirator kneeling before cedar floor panel. He prized plank, free, revealing hollow channels stuffed with char-black ash. The air above shimmered unnatural. Steel masked man waved hands. From ash rose faint image, glimmer of swirling darkness, blue motes flickering like ghost of Night King's eyes. Ash demon. Summoned memory? Aegon felt surge of danger. These men sought to resurrect frost power harnessed from valley remains. He must interrupt. He stepped into open. Hold. His dagger glinted. Robes whirled. Steel mask hissed. He raised rod carved from obsidian. Sparks of azure shot forth. Aegon ducked. Roll. Close distance. He slammed shoulder into robed man, knocking rod askew. Blue bolt shattered bookcase, freezing oak instant. Second conspirator lunged with knife. Aegon caught wrist, twisted until bone snapped. Man crumpled. Third tried to flee. Aegon's thrown dagger stuck calf. He toppled screaming. Steel mask recovered, chanting in harsh Valyrian. Rod swirling the ash pit blossomed lightning blue, coalescing into shape of clawing hand. Aegon seized fallen rod wielder's wrist, but magic burned flesh like liquid nitrogen. He grunted, forced grip downward, rod tipped toward ash. With free hand he ripped plank from neighbor floor slot, jammed rod into cedar wedge. Electrical crackle pulsed. Magic shorted, rebounding upon caster. His mask exploded outward. Face beneath blackened, eyes bursting white. He fell stiff. Blue light collapsed, ash scudding lifeless across floor. Aegon stamped boxes closed, smothering embers. Footsteps thundered. Visenya burst inside, dark sister bared and dripping candle wax. Behind her, Hightower guards. They surveyed carnage, 2 wounded, 1 dead, 1 unconscious. Aegon's palm blistered, but he stood tall. Visenya's eyes blazed. "Who are they?" "Crawlers in shadows," Aegon said, panting. Trying to coax Winter back. Lord Hightower arrived wearing nightshirt, face flushed. "What blasphemy within my tower?" Aegon gestured to ash residue. "Sorcery." "How long has the Citadel studied frozen lies? Are there factions wishing to replicate that power?" The old lord shook. "I know nothing of this." Visenya shouldered past, ripped mask from corpse. A maester's chain hung half-concealed beneath robes. She snarled. "Tell your archmaesters, meddle with ice and die by fire." Aegon closed fist, ignoring pain. "We leave at dawn. Old Town may keep its blessing. I carry my own gods." News of the incident reached Hightower's corridors like wildfire, though details twisted. Some whispered Aegon slew a demon. Others that Visenya burned 3 maesters alive. Truth mattered less than aura of dread stoked. By sunrise, faith militant commanders sought audiences, pledging unswerving loyalty if His Grace rid the realm of black sorcery. Aegon accepted with measured gravitas, but withheld full account, instead entreating Grand Maester Orlin to purge Citadel of any complicit. Orlin bowed, yet wariness deepened lines at his eyes. Dragons, he realized, were not only lords of flame, they unmasked secrets long safe beneath scrollskin. Departing Old Town, Aegon bore deeper scars than the blister on his palm. He had glimpsed what ambition married to fear could attempt. If maesters, guardians of knowledge, toyed with undead shards, others might too. Renegade lords, displaced priests, iron bank schemers. Night King's fall did not extinguish longing for forbidden power. It merely scattered coals across wild grasses. Flying northeast along Mander Valley, he conferred midair with Visenya by shouted Valyrian across the gap between Balerion and Vagar. They agreed a new order must guard against clandestine magic, an order answerable only to Crown. Visenya favored blades, Aegon, watchers. They settled on both. Thus seeds of future organizations sowed. The Knight's Lantern, clandestine network of scholars and rangers sworn to monitor arcana. At High Garden Rest Estate, Lady Olenna Tyrell, then still lean and flint-sharp, though not yet the Queen of Thorns, greeted them with cunning courtesy. She offered Aegon a greenhouse tour, showing early red roses mutated by grafting to frost-resistant stock. Symbolic of adaptation. "Strength," she said, "is not just swords or petals, it is knowing which root to cut, which to feed." Aegon hummed approval, glimpsing ally who wielded intrigue like Valyrian dagger. They parted with treaties for grain and nods of mutual respect. Their path next curved east toward Stormlands, where Argilochus' remaining bannermen contested one another for leftover scraps. But before Balerion's wings cast shadow upon Storm's End's drum towers, a raven from Dragonstone intercepted. Corlys Valerion's fleet battered by new storm. Off Shipbreaker Bay, 3 ships lost, cargo of dragonglass arrowheads for garrisons gone to bottom. Worse, Sunfire's clutch had cracked ahead of schedule, without Laena present. They were at sea. The hatchlings risked exposure. Aegon banked northeast, heart pounding. Balerion responded with raw speed. Vigar thundered after. They reached Dragonstone by nightfall. Scaffolding glowed with torches, decks teemed. Laena herself had landed hours earlier upon sea smoke to aid. 2 hatchlings emerged fine, Little Orion and Paleharp. But third egg collapsed inward before shell parted. Chick within suffocated. Laena wept quietly. Aegon offered comfort but also counsel. "We will fail some lives. What matters is we honor loss by guarding those who remain." She nodded, wiping tears. In days after, Aegon stabilized operations, reinforced hatchery roofs, built breakwater for fleet, dispatched divers to salvage dragonglass crates, and named Laena Keeper of Flame and Scale, highest office for dragon care outside royal family. Visenya meanwhile sailed across narrow sea, with Yorick's, to Bravos, presenting shattered ice rod as evidence of Maester conspiracy, bargaining with Sea Lord for information about Shadowbinders rumored among free cities. She returned after 2 moons with wisp of new fear. Traders in Ashai spoke of pale wanderers along dry deep desert, blue-eyed, enslaving jackal tribes. Whether rumor or omen, the specter of frozen sorcery stirred again. Time marched regardless. Construction at Aegon Fort accelerated. Stone masons shaped volcanic basalt imported from Dragonstone into walls. Blacksmiths forged hinges for gates. Glassblowers from Lice installed colored panes in new sept. Scribes drafted royal code. Dragon law, equal liberties codified. Duty of levy. Rights of small folk to petition king's justices. Aegon signed each scroll, wax sealed under dragon's sigil, twined with direwolf. He also appointed Brandon Snow, first ranger of the Knight's Lantern. Brandon gathered spies from each region, wildling outriders, ex-Bravosi tithe collectors, errant maesters disillusioned by Old Town. Their mark: a white pine cone on sable field, barely noticed. Their order: watch for unnatural cold, forbidden conjurations, and whispers of blue fire. In the Riverlands, word came of minor lords hoarding shards of Harrenhal's melted stone, believing them lucky charms. Yet some reported sickness after touching shards. Skin pale, breath smoky in heat. Brandon's lantern riders confiscated every piece, burying them under quicklime pits at Moat Cailin. Aegon used that magic, once broken, left splinters seeking flesh. The realm must learn caution. 1 winter later, mild, merciful, yet still biting enough, Queen Rhaenys gave birth to a son in Dragonstone Solar. They named him Maegor, after Aegon's father. Visenya watched, expression unreadable, then embraced Rhaenys softly. Maegor's first cry carried under vaulted ceiling, answered by distant roar of juvenile Orion, as if tiny dragon heralded new prince. Bard sang of omen. Dragon and heir born same hour. Soon after, Visenya quickened with child as well. Some courtiers whispered rivalry. Others predicted twin pillars to hold kingdom stable. Aegon felt weight double upon shoulders, king-father, keeper of nurture and fire. He walked ramparts nightly, eyes tracing stars. One such night, a lantern courier arrived breathless. A village at Skagos coast found entirely frozen, corpses intact, eyes black not blue. In Central Hall, carved on wall, an emblem. Spiral sun identical to box seized at Old Town. Aegon's heart chilled. Winter's ghost still wandered edges. He summoned small council. Bran Snow urged purge, but Rhaenys suggested caution. Maybe plague of mundane sort, mimicked frost kill. Edwys proposed expedition. Lantern agents, healers, handful of dragon glass-armed rangers. Aegon agreed, but forbade Balerion to travel so far north, lest alarm escalate. Instead, young Shadowflame accompanied team. Fiery enough to deter whites should they rise, small enough to land upon narrow beaches. Visenya's pregnancy kept her from flying. She entrusted Dark Sister to Brandon, a high honor. The expedition embarked. Weeks stretched into months. Rhaenys fretted. Sleep, fitful. Finally Messenger Raven returned. Village ashes now, no undead, but signs of ritual. Marks scrawled in ash, identical to Valyrian glyph for breath. Theory: rogue maesters or cultists, testing ice fragments combined with wildfire. 8 conspirators fled before team arrived. Tracks east along Bay of Seals. Brandon promised pursuit. Aegon realized realm might battle shadows many decades. Conquest never ends. It simply changes shape. Spring thunder rolled across King's Landing, the first spring tourney to celebrate Prince's naming. Joust lists filled with knights of every reach. Even free folk champions rode shaggy garrons, lances crudely carved, but hearts fierce. In melee, a giant named Treebreaker stood against 10 challengers, and won by hurling them like sacks. Laughter and gold showered him. Small folk from north and south mingled without swordline. Musicians blended Dornish lute with northern flute. An alewife from Barrowton kissed a Tyroshi spice vendor beneath garlands. Such union made Aegon smile. Proof swords were not only tools of fear, but also plows that tilled grudging fields for seeds of fellowship. On final day of tourney, as golden afternoon shifted coral, Blackwater Bay shimmered. From horizon, a single white sail approached. No banner. Harbor guards hailed. Reply drifted. Envoy from Pentos bearing gift. Gift turned out a chest of Myrish lace and letter from secret Magister Sithrax. Congratulations to Dragon King. Request for a trade pacts. Yet chest bottom concealed small sphere of milky glass, swirling with blue wisps. Dike Dewadoa. Lena recognized its hum. Same as box of ash. Alarm rang. Lantern spies interrogated Pentoshi envoy. He claimed ignorance. Investigation traced Sphere's craft to Tyroshian glass rights, commissioned by unknown robed man using Bravosi coin. Aegon sighed. Hydra regrew heads. Visenya, now heavy with child, insisted they crush each head until root found. Aegon assembled triad. He would secure central authority across crownlands. Rhaenys patrol coasts and liaise with foreign princes. Visenya lead covert war on shadow cults once babe born. She agreed enthusiastically, and so seasons cycled. Maegor learned to walk beside baby dragon Cloudburst. Scribes chronicled formation of town, circling Aegon Fort. Kingstown, they wrote, though soon shortened to Landing. Stone for Grand Red Keep arrived by barge. Builders' plans made allowances for hidden passages. If Winter's ghost ever slipped inside walls, King's Line would survive to fight. Beneath keep, cellars were carved to house dragon glass. Overhead, towers pointed like spears, meant to scratch night sky. On 10th anniversary of Night King's Fall, Aegon stood again in Valley of Ghosts. Hearttree now stout, limbs crimson. Snow fell soft. Gentle not dire. Gathered around him. Brandon Snow silver-haired. Lord Gorm the Wyse Psalm. Cloak cross-stitched with barley signifying prosperity. Young Lord John Stark. Torrhen's heir. Laena Valerion holding toddler Pelaharp perched on hip. Maegor, 8 eyes like violet dawn. Valerian and grown Orion patrolled clouds overhead. Aegon addressed them. He spoke of vigilance, of unity, of how shadow cult may yet slither. He announced foundation of watchfires, beacons along wall and south passes, manned by joint forces of Night's Watch and free folk. At signal, dragons would fly. Then he raised goblet of iced blackberry wine. To the realm that never forgets, to light that never sleeps. They drank. In hush that followed, distant howl echoed. Wolf maybe, or wind. Aegon felt neither fear nor triumph, but quiet readiness. He knew story stretched further than his lifetime. Children beside him would carry torch. Dragons yet unborn would ride new skies. Winter and fire would waltz long after he turned to dust. But he also knew one truth carved by his blade in a valley of snow ashes. When people stand together, wolf beside dragon, wildling beside knight, maester beside giant, darkness can be shattered. Above, aurora shimmered, green and pink curtains flapping like banners of gods. Aegon watched them ripple, then turned to descendants, allies and old friends. He smiled, small but certain. Let us leave this place better than we found it, he said, and ever guard the embers of dawn. The wind curled around Hearttree, stirring leaves to applause like distant flames, and the realm breathed once more. Older, wiser, yet young enough to hope. Gay. The Valley of Ghosts slept beneath its quilt of quiet snow, long after the gathering dispersed. Wind combed the drifts into rippling dunes, erasing all tracks save a single pair. The deep furrows cut by Balerian's talons. Even those impressions, grand as trenches, faded as night layered new powder over the memory of claws. In King's Landing the revels of the dawn jubilee roared into their second week, but here, between the white shoulders of nameless hills, only the sigh of frost-born cedars conversed with the Hearttree's crimson leaves. They creaked, and the creak might have been benediction or warning, or simply the voice of age bending before time. No man could say, for the valley held no men now, only the watchful cold, the restless moon, and the lingering promise of vigilance. Aegon had camped 30 leagues south that night, at a fortified orchard where winter apples hung shrunken and sweet as honeyed iron. His pavilion stood in soft torch glow amid rows of bare boughs. His son Maegor slept inside, curled like a kitten beneath a mound of direwolf furs. Balerion lazed beyond the palisade, wreathed by sparks of his own half-dreaming embers. The king did not sleep. He walked the orchard aisles with hands clasped behind him, counting constellations through twisting branches. Repose was a stranger to him of late. Every time his eyelids drifted near the threshold of surrender, shapes coalesced. A spiral sun daubed in ash, the smear of blue fire on cedar boards, the slow unfolding of frost where it had no place to live. He would jolt awake and feel for the dagger beneath his pillow, then lie waiting for dawn. On this night, he stilled his mind with memory. He revisited the first time he had grasped Balerion's reins, the first time the great black dragon leapt from Dragonstone's cliffs and split the clouds, leaving his lungs behind. He thought of Bran Snow's breath fogging in moonlight, while they knelt at the Night King's corpse-strewn pedestal. Of Visenya's gentle, silent tears after her own child quickened in her womb. Of Rhaenys' broad, astonished joy the first time little Orion hopped the low wall of the training yard and landed, wings fluttering in her. They were different kinds of fire, a furnace, a hearth, and a lantern, but fire nonetheless. He drew warmth from them, and in that warmth sleep finally approached, light-footed. By sunrise Aegon was in the saddle reviewing his escort. 120 riders, Blackplate veterans of the Dawn Valley campaign, mixed with fresh recruits from Golden Grove and Norcross, assembled beneath frost-coated apple trunks. They broke camp, scattering cookfires with quick kicks of snow. Maegor, eyes still sticky with dreams, rode at his father's side. No one asked if it was safe for a boy prince to travel highways, still dotted by bandits who had not yet accepted the realm's new order. The question had long since died under the certainty of dragon shadows. Still, Balerion would not fly this morning. He dozed on the far slope, satisfied to lumber behind the column in a slow, earth-shaking lope. The sight delighted Maegor. He giggled every time Balerion's huff sent dust puffs swirling like tiny snow devils. They rode east toward the river because Aegon wished to inspect the beacon hills, new wooden towers raised by the lantern's first builders, glittering like watch candles against the dawn. Men worked with saw and adze atop skeletal platforms. Black lantern banners flapped below, a pine cone painted white in their center. Aegon dismounted at the largest tower, a triple-braced column of cedar and blackened iron. The foreman, a squat Stormlander named Gromley, wiped sawdust from his nose to greet the king. 4 days more for roofing the pitch tiles, Majesty, Gromley said. Then we mount the dragonglass brazier. Glassmiths swear it will never shatter, but will embed iron ribs just the same. Aegon nodded, running gloved fingertips along an unshaved beam. And fuel. Pine pitch and whale oil, enough to keep a pillar of light for 6 nights. Thormund grimaced. Long as no raider puts an arrow in the cistern, we'll ring the base with boar pit traps and spike fences. Bandits fear dragons more than spikes, Aegon said. But the realm cannot station Balerion at every hill. Build your fences. Double the watch at dusk. The lantern must never dim. He remounted. Maegor, earnest eyes fixed on the carpenters, whispered, Father, will the lantern see the whole realm? Not yet, Aegon said. But one day its lights will ring the coasts, the passes, the long wall, and the furthest march down in Dorne. He ruffled the boy's snowy hair. Light travels faster than fear. They pressed on. Midday found them at a ruined sept outside Horn, where survivors of the winter famine had dug gardens among toppled columns. Sisters in patched gray linen knelt, coaxing potato sprouts from thawed beds. Aegon reined in, greeted them, shared salt and dried figs. One sister, young, hair scraped severe, asked shyly whether the rumor was true that the king welcomed all faiths. All hearts, he corrected. For faith, hearts lead minds. But hearts also answer hunger, grief, loneliness, and hope. Whoever seeks those things under my sky is welcome. The sister blushed. She produced a crudely carved wooden 7-pointed star and asked if Maegor would bless it. The boy mimicked his father, dipping his head, muttering a phrase half-remembered from Septon lessons. The sisters beamed. After they left, Visenya's personal courier, a hawk-eyed Myrish archer named Rallio, arrived in a lather. He bore a coded scroll. The lantern pursuit party in Skagos had vanished. Last message said they trailed the cultists to a cave system along the Bay of Seals. Then, silence. Brandon Snow's hand had not signed in 10 days. Aegon read twice. Around him horses stamped, sensing tension. He folded the parchment carefully. Double pace, he ordered. They would turn north once supply wagons from White Harbor reached them. For now, they rode to Eastwatch to gather intelligence. Balerian's wounded wing had long healed. He would fly. They reached Eastwatch 5 days later, escorted through new palisades manned by black brothers and wildlings in matching wolf sprig surcoats. Gorm the Ysp song, winter lines deeper at her eyes, greeted them. Her scouts had nothing on Brandon's trail. But giant prints near Skagos cliffs, she said. Fresh, not ours. Aegon stiffened. Fresh giants loyal to no clan? Unnerving. He assembled a new expedition. Maegor protested when told to remain at Eastwatch. But his father's glare ended debate. Balerian soared with only Aegon and 10 lantern rangers. Lean, obsidian-armed, silent. They followed the bay's ragged coastline. Night pressed like ink. Snow began again, petty by northern measure, but disquieting so late into the thaw. At moonrise a pale glow rippled across water. Not aurora. This light shivered vertical, as if underwater columns of ghost fire mirrored the stars. They descended behind a tooth of rock. Rangers slipped into shadows. Aegon crept to the cliff's lip and peered. On a shale strand below, torches ringed a sinkhole. Figures in sable robes chanted, their hoods etched with spiral suns repeatedly. In the center, 6 giant shapes knelt, living giants, arms bound behind backs, heads bowed. Their hide cloaks were gone. Skin glowed sickly as frostbite under torch glare. Robes dragged crates forward. When lids flipped, shards like the one from Old Town reflected torchlight. Milky glass swirling with blue motes. Cultists pressed shards against giant chests. At each contact, frost spidered outward. The giants convulsed, screaming. Voice of a child parted night. It hurts. Oh, old gods, it hurts. It was monstrous hearing that cry from such a vast throat. Aegon's eyes narrowed. The rod in Old Town returned to mind. They were forging new frostwites, raising thralls not corpses, but living flesh enslaved by ice. He signaled rangers. They unlimbered dragonglass-tipped javelin. But Aegon hesitated. Torch ring held dozens, easy prey for Balerion. Yet among them, he spotted figures in Maester's gray, chains glinting. If he burned them, evidence incinerated. He opted for swift infiltration. 5 rangers crept used to beach's edge. Aegon descended by a natural stair. Blackfire strapped across back. They approached unseen until the chant reached fever pitch. A hooded leader raised arms, holding aloft a fist-sized crystal skull of sapphire blue. He spoke Valyrian older than doom. Words rippled like breaking ice. Sparks of frost danced above skull, drifting toward bound giants. Aegon could not allow the next verse. He burst from shadows, bellowed a single word. Enough! Blackfire hissed free. Panic erupted. Cultists scattered. The leader rotated, sapphire skull still upraised. Eyeholes pulsed azure. He rasped. The dragon arrives to warm our crucible. He thrust skull skyward. Blue comet of light shot out, wove serpent-like, and shot toward Balerion's silhouette overhead. Aegon shouted warning. Balerion veered, but magic coil snared his right wingtip. Where it touched, membrane iced. The dragon roared, flapping awkwardly. Rangers launched javelins. Cultists fell, spiked through hearts that shattered with frost hiss. The leader smiled behind bone-white mask. He placed skull against his chest. Frost spidered across his torso but did not pierce robes. Instead, a shimmering aura formed, a shield of glassy air. Blackfire struck it, sparks singing. Within shield the cultist laughed. Giants moaned, lungs rattling with half-frozen blood. One toppled, binding snapped. He crawled toward Aegon seeking help, but Frost climbed neck. His eyes flooded sapphire. With final lucid breath he whispered, "Stop them." Before ice seized heart, Aegon gritted teeth. Blackfire whirled again, battering shield with ringing clangs. Each stroke cracked a vein of ice deeper through aura, until webs fissured. The leader gasped, chest heaving. Aegon feinted right, pivoted, plunged blade. Steel slid through ribs, piercing spine. Frost exploded outward. Shockwave blasted sand, extinguished torches. Cultists shrieked. Shield collapsed. Leader slumped lifeless. With shield gone, skull rolled onto shingle. Aegon kicked it aside, then shouted to Balerion. Dragon banked, shook last ice from wing. He inhaled and exhaled a narrow gout, incinerating crates, but steering flame away from giants still living. 4 remained alive but unconscious, frost spidering down limbs. Aegon retrieved shards from their bodies, each hissed, melting. He smashed every remaining crystal under heel. Battle ended as quickly as begun. Rangers bound survivors, 2 maesters, 3 hooded novices, and 1 Tyroshi glasswright. They interrogated at dawn. The Tyroshi broke first, hired by a brotherhood calling themselves Breath of the Others, funded by coin shipped through leaseholders in Bravos. Goal: create living conduits of winter magic, forging new commanders capable of raising dead after Night King's demise. They had tested fragments across steadfast shore farmers weeks earlier, those black-eyed corpses discovered by Brandon. As sun climbed, a single figure trudged from cliff path, Brandon Snow, ragged, limping, but alive. Lantern survivors flagged him to camp. Blood crusted his brow, dragonglass dagger in hand. He had tracked cultists for days, slain 2 adepts before stumbling on ice nets arrayed across ravine. He'd cut himself free at dawn and followed smoke from Balerion's strafing run. Aegon clasped his friend in fierce embrace. They counted losses. 3 rangers dead, 1 giant irrecoverable, 2 bound giants in fatal frost limbo. Brandon examined them, tears welled at sight of his people's torment. He asked mercy. Quick death by dragonfire. Giants half conscious, murmured assent with guttering voices. Aegon agreed. Balerion granted release, its breath swift but reverent. Ash drifted across tide, blending with morning mist. They returned to Eastwatch heavy-hearted. Gorm assembled morning feast for giants. Barrels of mead, drums low and hollow. Free folk danced barefoot in snow. Aegon drank but little, mind turning dark corners. The breath of the others remained at large, and behind them a banker's coin. He summoned Lantern Council. Brandon, Gorm, Rallio, and new spymaster Lady Nira of Liss, a defected shadowbinder who hated ice cults more than any. He charged them, root out brotherhood, silence coin, purge scholars dabbling in forbidden frost. Lantern riders fanned across seas. Corlius' fleet blockaded Bravosi snug harbors. Visenya, though nearing late months of her pregnancy, directed covert strikes from her solar on King's Landing's maiden walk. Within a year, 19 cellars of frost relics burned. 30 conspirators vanished in black sacks to Dragonstone dungeons. Yet whispers persisted. Power lost will lure fools forever. Aegon accepted endless vigilance as crown's cost. 3 summers passed. The Red Keep's first wing soared above city, crimson stone veined with black, visible miles out at sea. Maegor, 11 now, trained daily in yard beneath gold-rimmed helm, sparring against Stormlander pages who alternately feared and adored him. He rode Cloudburst, who had grown into lean serpentine storm-white drake with wings the color of dawn lilac. Mother Rhaenys insisted on supervision. But Maegor's seat was strong, his laughter fearless. On bright autumn day festival, Queen Visenya birthed twins, a son, Aenys, and daughter, Daenora. The city exploded in jubilation, for omens declared twins lucky, double blessings, double line. Yet fools muttered that double flame divides path. Marbled streets heard prophecies of dragon heads, numbering more than 3 could fracture unity. Aegon let gossip swirl. People would say what they pleased. But he commissioned extra stonemasons to widen keep nurseries. A week into celebrations, a messenger from the Reach arrived with tragedy. Lord Harlan Redwine's entire vineyard estate at Arbor lay encased in ice overnight, despite 90-degree sunshine. Vines snapped under rime. Workers froze in barn. Identical spiral sun sigils iced upon casks. The breath was not dead. Aegon convened war council in Red Keep's new painted hall, named for fresh mural of Dawn Valley battle. Present, Rhaenys Visenya, pale but resolute. Brandon Snow, Gorm, Archmaester Veron, now repentant. Plan formed, smash route by capturing Banker Link in Bravos. Corlys Velaryon, cunning and sea-brave, volunteered to sail under guise of trade convoy. Visenya insisted on accompanying, though her childbed had barely cooled. She would not risk crosswind on Dragonback with belly still healing. Instead, she trained Knights Lantern assassins for infiltration. They departed under new moon. Corlys, Rallio, Nera, and 14 Grey Cloaks disguised as Myrish spice ushers. Their flagship, Silver Serpent, cut waves swift and silent. Balerion watched from King's Landing sky but did not follow. Stealth mattered. Bravos harbored them in Rainbow Quay, where tides swirl among finger canals. The party slipped into Purple Lantern District at dusk, weaving through fog that smelled of cloves. Their target, Sea Lord's second accountant, Master Hilcho Nargaris, rumored to funnel coin to Brotherhood. Nyra charmed him at masked masquerade, lured him to rooftop pergola. Grey Cloaks seized him. Rallio's blade pricked truth. Coin shipments disguised as marble imports, loaded onto flat-bottom barges sailing west under false Tyrish papers. Hilco's ledger referenced codename Cedar, obvious link to Cedar Floor prophecy, and shipping route pointing to Lys, Tyrosh Volantis. Visenya's network back home set watchers at every harbor. Within weeks, a barge, hushed lullaby, docked at Lys, hull to brim with barrels. Lantern spies infiltrated stevedores. Barrels indeed bore marble on top, but deeper coils of linen hid more milky shards. They replaced half with blanks, trailed remaining to Tyrosh warehouse. At midnight they stormed. Warehouse exploded in frost flame. 3 Grey Cloaks perished, but they uncovered ledgers upstream. A name recurred, Grand Maester Orlin. Shock reverberated. The Grey, stooped scholar who had bowed to Aegon in Old Town stood revealed as mastermind. Hard to fathom, yet ledger inks traced his private cipher. Nera double-checked. Unmistakable. Aegon traveled incognito to Old Town with Brandon and Gorm, leaving Rhaenys regent at King's Landing. They arrived disguised as trade envoys, meeting Orlin in Citadel Observatory. The old man welcomed them with mild eyes, never suspecting. Brandon confronted him. Orlin blanched, swore innocence. These were for research, to protect Realm, he insisted. He wept as he described vision glimpsed through frost shards. World choking in dragonfire, he wished to craft counterbalance. Magic cannot remain in hands of few, he cried. The realm must possess weapons equal to yours. Aegon listened, sorrow warring with wrath. You conjured winter on infants, he said softly. You froze living giants to make your point. Orlin collapsed to knees, chains rattling. I lost control. Radicals hijacked shipments. I tried to recall them. Proof? He offered letters, sealed, but dated after tragedies. Too late. Aegon's heart hardened. He invoked new dragon law. Sorcery harming innocents, punishable by death. But he did not burn Orlin. He ordered Citadel Conclave to witness as Brandon Snow, in heavy silence, slid obsidian blade across the maester's throat. Knowledge, yes, but not above life. After execution, Aegon addressed assembly. Scholars' duty is to safeguard truth, not unleash slaughter. The Citadel will contribute to Lantern oversight. Resist and you join Orlin in dust. Many maesters objected in private. Publicly they nodded. Grand Maester's seat vacant, Aegon appointed Veron. Once skeptic, now fierce foe of reckless magic, requiring his vow on Dragonglass altar that he would extirpate frost research forever. The realm breathed easier. Yet Aegon sensed fracture. Fear of dragon tyranny that Orlin exploited would not vanish. He redoubled reforms: council seats for non-nobles, grain relief, harbor court of trade mediators. But rumor has its own wings. Years scrolled by. Twins blossomed. Ennis gentle and scholarly, Daenora fierce, quick with bow. Maegor shifted from carefree laughter to brooding independence. He excelled at sword with cloudburst higher than safe, tested boundaries. He asked why father hunted scholars. Did that not mirror Night King's intolerance? Aegon tried to explain difference between knowledge and cruelty, but Maegor's eyes remained clouded. One autumn, a masked troupe arrived. The Embervale players, famed for shadow puppet epics. They performed before royal court, Dottie. Their play depicted a wise maester banished by jealous king. The maester forged alliance with spirits of ice, who turned out kind and misunderstood. When the puppet maester fell, audience gasped. Some applauded. Aegon's jaw clenched. Lantern agents questioned players. They confessed Tyroshi patron commissioned script. Tyrosh again. A pattern. While spies sifted layers, a darker blow fell. Rhaenys, traveling incognito through Duskendale to review roadworks, was ambushed, not by frost cultists, by sellswords wearing no marks. She survived, thanks to Mirax's strafing woods, but her guard captain died. Band lengths traced to Bravosian guild not extant. A shell. Another puppet string. Aegon's grief burned quiet, cold fury. He convened secret council. Visenya, Corlys, Brandon, Nira, Verondata. There would be punitive campaign, covert, against Tyroshi financiers. Aegon would not risk open war. Tariffs, privateer letters, and one dragon in night sky sufficed. Visenya volunteered, though still nursing newborn daughter Alice. She insisted, dragons do not succumb to cradle. She sailed on Vygar with flotilla. Weeks later, plumes of green flame lit Tyrosh horizon, as Vygar torched dye warehouses. Tyroshi Prince Archon sued for talks. He offered to expose remaining frost cult patrons. Visenya returned bearing chests of ledgers naming 40 houses, minor lords, 2 Citadel fellows, and shockingly, a cousin of Laena Velaryon. Betrayal cut deep. Laena recused from investigations to preserve propriety. Trials ensued. Some culprits fled across narrow sea. Others met dragonglass justice. But every victory cost coin of trust. Lords in the Vale whispered that dragon justice trampled due process. The faith militant renewed calls to monitor royal sorcery. Aegon proposed great symposium. Lords, maesters, septons, wildling chieftains gather in King's Landing to draft codex of magical conduct. Faith militant accepted warily. Citadel sent archmaesters. Giant envoy trod from Frostfangs. Even Dorne's Prince Kyle sent delegate. Across 3 moons they debated. Rhaenys mediated calmly. Visenya scowled through sessions. Brandon represented North plus free folk, argued for open magic research under lantern eyes. Veron insisted on written licensing. Septon Jareth demanded outright prohibition. Maegor, now 17, sat in gallery, absorbing. He conversed with maester apprentices after hours, curious about forbidden lore. One night, Lantern Patrol found him in black cells, interviewing captured cult defector. Aegon reprimanded him. Knowledge is flame. Hold it wrong and you burn. Maegor retorted, better learn to hold than fear the burn. Tension simmered. Symposium concluded with compromise. Agreement of 7 lights. Practices of necromancy, ice binding, and wildfire-ice hybridization outlawed. Dragon research regulated. Citadel to establish campus in King's Landing to share safe magic. Lantern overseas watch given royal charter. Faith militant seat on Oversight Council. All signed. Aegon breathed relief. Yet certain eyes, chief among them Maegor's, lingered skeptical. Several restful years followed. Harvests abundant. Plague minor. Dornish envoys warm. Aegon rode west to open new road, linking Old Oak to Highgarden. Rhaenys oversaw dragon hatchery. Sunfire laid eggs. Cloudburst courted Shadowflame. Dragons multiplied to 12. Visenya directed fortification of Harrenhal's melted ruin into repository for confiscated frost relics, calling it the Vault of Tears. But shadows returned like tide at night. Reports from far north. Thin men with black eyes, not blue, hunting caribou, the caribou's breath freezing midair. Lantern detachments investigated. Found stone circles etched with hybrid sigils of spiral sun and raptor wing. Evidence suggested new ideological merge. Breath cult allied with fire-skeptic zealots who saw themselves as heralds of balance, not ice reavers, but keepers of cold flame. They believed realm must forever straddle brink. If dragons too strong, ice must rise. If ice too strong, dragons must burn. Their leader called himself the Candescent Shade, a title traced to Bravos rumor. Lantern spies glimpsed him once. Tall, hair white as Aegon's, face veiled, eyes hidden by dark glass. Some said he rode a pale wyvern across shivering sea. Others he traveled via Bravosi mirror barges. Legends multiply when truth scarce. One brittle winter eve, Shade's agents struck. They infiltrated Red Keep for artifact and vault. Sapphire skull once used on Skagos, stored temporarily before transfer to Vault of Tears. They emerged through forgotten sewer, fought lantern guards, slew 5 but failed. However, stolen ledger of confiscated items gone. Names, schedules, maps exposed. Aegon furious. He scoured Keep. Traitor traced to household page, bribed with silvers. Page hanged, yet damage done. Shade launched raids. Frost bombs on grain stores near Tumbleton. Wildfire frost blasts, slicing galleys near Gulltown. Sabotage of beacon at Duskendale. Tower extinguished one night. Few casualties, but fear bruised realms calm. Aegon convened war council. Visenya argued for demonstration. Burn entire archipelago where Shade hides. Rhaenys advised measured chase. Capture him. Brandon recommended infiltration. Debate ended with tripartite plan. Visenya leads show of force along western narrow sea to flush Shade. Rhaenys spearheads diplomatic nets to cut funding. Brandon and Maegor volunteered. Infiltrate Frostfang in north-rumored Shade retreat. Aegon hesitated but permitted Maegor. Trusting Brandon's mentorship, Cloudburst flew them to Free Folk outpost near Last River. They donned furs, changed names, rode reindeer across icy plains. Trail tough. Along ghost cliffs they discovered Ice Wharf, harboring pale-skinned mariners. Shipping crates to Bravos. Brandon sketched details. Sent Raven. They advanced into caves lined with lightning-cracked glass. Their statues of giants carved in swirl motif flanked hall of blue torches. At far chamber, a throne of frozen ironwood. Upon it Shade. He greeted them in polished common. Welcome, heir of dragon, son of fire. He tossed flicker of frost flame between fingers. Maegor trembled but answered. Why shroud in darkness? If you seek balance, speak not of terror. Shade laughed. He removed visor. Face looked half like Maegor's reflection. Same violet eyes. Same silver hair. Maegor gasped. Shade claimed to be bastard of Aegon, begot with a Bravosi sorceress years prior. False, but Maegor not certain. Shade wove tale. Aegon fears sharing might. Hoards dragon for bloodline. Shade offered Maegor partnership. Share cold flame to keep father's empire checked. Brandon recognized manipulation, moved to strike. Shade flicked hand. Frostwave knocked him aside. Maegor, torn, hesitated. Shade pressed. Join, and free knowledge. Brandon cried. Lies. Cloudburst shrieked outside cave, echoing terror. Maegor's heart pounded. He recalled father's warnings, Orlan's dead eyes, giants pleading. Moments shattered when Shade hurled Shard at Brandon. Maegor dove intercepting. Shard grazed arm, freezing flesh instant. Pain like 1,000 needles jarred clarity. Rage replaced confusion. He drew obsidian dagger, flung. Shade dodged. Dagger nicked visor rim. He cursed, retreated into mirror-like portal of ice, escaping. Cavi shook. Support pillars cracking. Maegor hoisted Brandon. They fled as ceiling collapsed. Outside, Cloudburst carried them skyward. Below, cave imploded, snow swallowing mouth. Back in King's Landing, Brandon rested in Maester Ward. Aegon embraced son. Relief, overshadowing betrayal suspicion. Maegor recounted but withheld Shade's claim of kinship. Yet Visenya saw something gnawing boy's soul. She asked privately. He confessed. She dismissed as manipulation. But seed planted. Aegon redoubled fatherly efforts. He taught Maegor statecraft, heard his doubts, guided him. Over years Maegor tempered. Yet inside, ember of skepticism glowed. Monarch may hold too much fire. Shade remained fugitive but slowed. Lantern beacons glowed nightly. On 20th anniversary of Dawn victory, realm gathered for grand coronation of Aegon as Emperor of Seven Flames, a symbolic renewal acknowledging full unification after Dorne's peaceful accession, achieved by marriage of Daenora to Prince Kyle's heir. Celebrations dwarfed any before. Balerion roared above city spires, fleets across seas lit sails. Hearts soared. That night Aegon stood on Red Keep's highest balcony with Rhaenys and Visenya. Stars wheeled. Blackwater carried lanterns. He sighed content. Realm not perfect, but alive. He felt age in bones yet purpose strong. Below, Maegor watched from garden. Cloudburst coiled behind Rose Arbor. Moonlight silvered his hair. He touched scar on arm where Frostshard kissed. He loved father, yet world vast. Maybe father's light cast long shadows. Far north, in abandoned ice fort, Shade studied maps by cold flame. Visor cracked still. He smiled thinly, tracing route south. He whispered prophecy of equal night. That one day, dragons might burn realm in pride, and cold flame would answer. But for now, Valley of Ghosts lay calm. Heart trees leaves whispered to moon, telling story of a king who shattered darkness, of people who forged fragile peace. And though whispers far, far away plotted, the embers of dawn glowed steady, guarded by dragons, wolves, giants, and the stubborn will of humankind. The night passed. Dawn licked horizon amber. Aegon closed eyes, breathed morning's first warmth. Somewhere in that hush, he thought he heard Bran Snow's horn again. Not mourning nor alarm, but simple note of enduring watchfulness, echoing through years like steady heartbeat. He smiled, knowing vigilance never ends. But light, too, never dims so long as hearts remain willing to tend the flame.